Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Entered the World of Cyberpunk 2077 movie. Before we start, please go support KING-JEISON for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made, there will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Chapter 1. Year 2077. The Earth is actually in the year 2077, and honestly things have advanced so much that things that seemed revolutionary like paying with credit cards or using devices formerly known as cell phones became totally obsolete and therefore remain as another stain in the passing of the years as relics that were the boom that contributed to technological evolution, however those objects were already relics. Today every person in the world had slots installed on the right side of their necks in which chips had to be inserted that allowed them to connect to the global network. But these chips received updates every so often, which meant that every so often they were forced to buy a chip with greater capacity, and without them it was obvious that you could not connect to the World Wide Web, which would be a serious problem for said person who activated to carry out pirated updates that forced the old chip to connect to the web. However, humanity was not really satisfied with just having a chip embedded in their necks since they were born, therefore people began to implant mechanical prosthetics to improve their physical abilities, which obviously led to the mutilation of limbs, insertion of internal organs and many other things, such as implanting weapons in their bodies. These days the majority of humanity had at least one or two prosthetics, and those who did not have them were basically extremely poor people, or those who only had what was necessary to live and could not afford to spend their money on getting a prosthesis. In a short time people reached a point where 80% of their bodies were pure chromium. This fact came with a drawback that every person with high amounts of chromium in their body had to pay, and that was summed up in one word: madness, and insanity that caused these people to cause genocides, mass homicides, large-scale destruction of properties that were easy for them to cause, because in short, these people had become ruthless weapons capable of killing with terrifying ease. And why did this happen? At first people did not know why this happened until after some studies the reason for such madness was found, and this could not be anything other than the brain. This response bothered the masses for receiving a rather stupid response in their opinion, however after an explanation the masses had no choice but to accept the answer. Now what was that explanation? Well people were aware of their artificial limbs connected to their brain so they could move them like their old limb. It wasn't the same with the brain, since it unconsciously knew that that wasn't its limb. Now the unconsciousness of the brain didn't really bother it about having the odd limb taken away. However, the fact that most of the body was quickly replaced began to bother the brain, causing it to unconsciously start rejecting the artificial body, causing a high level of paranoia, illusions, imaginary voices, seeing things that weren't there, which would obviously drive a person to rapid insanity. The news was given worldwide with the hope that people would stop using so many prosthetics. However, talking to the masses was basically like talking to a bunch of animals with no apparent neurons in their heads, since, although there was a slight decrease in people using artificial limbs, the vast majority continued doing the same, which obviously caused more cases of people going crazy for chromium, which were called cyberpsychopaths. This situation led each country in the world to have its own neutralization forces specialized only in those specific cases. Now governments in their complete naivety thought that the problem had already been solved, which in itself was far from happening, since thanks to today's advanced technology, along with the ability to turn your limbs into weapons, caused the crime rate in countries to jump to unimaginable levels that practically seemed an uncontrollable situation. However, thanks to the fact that they equipped the police forces with state-of-the-art weapons and with incessant secrecy, the crime rate was kept at a somewhat controllable level, not enough to be controlled 100%, but no less than 89%. That was noticeable in the occasional arson attacks, explosions in buildings, vehicle accidents, etc. Well, that was in the cases of some countries. And that is what leads us to Night City, a city in the United States, more specifically located in California, the place with the highest crime rate in the world, with a controlled percentage of 73%, a place where shootings were seen daily, organized robberies, vehicle accidents caused by one gang attacking another, daily murders, cyberpsychopaths. These events were the daily bread in the city plagued by crime. But enough of explanations, because now we are going to focus on the main streets that entered a part of the slums where crime was not yet high enough to suffer attacks, such as explosions or some collateral damage, however it was still high enough for there to be occasional shootings or murders. On that street there was a rather old pickup truck of a moss green color, to be more specific, the vehicle was a Thornton Galena G240, a vehicle that was certainly a discontinued model that few people used due to how old it was. This was the case for the red-haired woman who was driving the vehicle with a sleepy look, almost reaching a dead look. The woman herself appeared to be about 26 to 28, however in reality she was about 32 years old. As for her appearance, the Redeed wore a uniform that consisted mostly of a neon yellow jacket that identified her as an employee who worked for the city's medical center, more specifically in the area of medical technology. This woman's name is Gloria Martinez. Note: I know that those who saw it know that the last name Martinez is probably from a Latin country, either because they have heard it somewhere or from someone they know who has that last name. I literally have an uncle whose last name is Martinez, but anyway, this note was to tell you that I am not going to get too involved with the nationalities of the characters, but Naruto is definitely not going to be Asian. The now called Gloria, certainly anyone who saw her would say that the woman had become a zombie, however the reason why the Redeed was in such a state was because of the long hours of work that she forced herself to do in order to pay for her daughter's school. After all, her daughter was studying at the Arasaka Academy, the most prestigious and expensive academy in the country. That in itself already explained why the Redeed tried so hard at work. However, another reason why she tried so hard was because of the fact that it was nothing more than her and her daughter, since the son of a bitch who got her pregnant at 15 got cold feet and abandoned them. Stopping at a traffic light, Gloria sleepily looked to her side in the passenger seat, only to see a white cartridge with some almost imperceptible traces of blood. For a moment, Gloria wondered if what she was doing was really right. However, she quickly shook her head and simply convinced herself that what she was doing was the most viable option if she wanted her daughter to continue attending Arasaka Academy. She was brought out of her thoughts when the car behind her started honking, implying that the traffic light had turned green. Gloria quickly accelerated, veering to the right as she entered the slums. Minutes after driving in that direction, you could already see people taking drugs without a care in the world, the occasional person robbing someone with a gun, prostitutes offering their services, even though it was still daytime, and there were even some people who, although it seemed quite uncomfortable to see, were masturbating with a hex toy in public without really caring at all. Gloria simply chose to ignore those people and simply continued on her way to some parking spaces that belonged to the apartment complex in which she lived. Calmly parking, the Redeed got out of her vehicle next to the cartridge and then closed the vehicle door with some bitterness when she saw that the door did not want to close the first time, so applying a little more force she was finally able to close the door. When Gloria was about to turn around to go to her apartment, something caught her attention, so holding back her sleep a little longer to feed her curiosity, the Redeed turned her gaze to the other side of the street to see some kind of car workshop. Okay, the workshop itself was not strange, since she moved to the area that workshop was always there. However, the workshop was not a business since it never served customers and always kept the same old and rusty cars inside, leaving only a space for one more car. But if you looked more closely, you could see some doors the size of a truck in the place where the empty space was. However, nothing that was mentioned about the workshop was what caught Gloria's attention, since she could see that every day. What intrigued her was the fact that in front of the workshop, there was a very dilapidated three-wheeled Mazda that, from what she knew, was so old that it was even considered an antique in 2018. Honestly, Gloria was seriously wondering how such a relic could be obtained, that at first glance, you could say that the poor vehicle would not start for anything in the world. However, her thoughts of glory were interrupted when a tuft of blonde hair crossed her vision, so looking in that direction, she now saw a boy who appeared to be about 22 years old with blue eyes and completely black loose clothing. Said boy was calmly leaving the workshop. Gloria had actually seen the boy a few times, and on no occasion had she seen him talking to anyone despite his young appearance. If she were asked what she thought of the boy, she honestly wouldn't know what to answer, but there was something she could say: he was intriguingly suspicious and, well, somewhat cute for his age, but of course, no one had heard it from her, so she would settle for that thought staying in her mind. Regaining attention, Gloria saw now how the blonde simply began to push the small cart without apparent effort into the workshop. Once the blonde left the small cart inside, he prepared to close the doors of the workshop until he noticed the Redeed's gaze, so looking up, the blonde made eye contact with the Redeed for a few long seconds until Gloria looked away and turned to go to her apartment, being followed by the calm gaze of the blonde, who finally closed the workshop with him inside. Opening the door to her apartment, the Redeed saw no one in the living room. Thinking that her daughter was in her room, Gloria simply walked tiredly until she reached the sofa and let herself fall heavily while leaving the cartridge at her side. Today had been a rather stressful day. Honestly, she just wanted to close her eyes and take a well-deserved rest, which she didn't take long to do, and she simply fell asleep there. For a moment, she didn't have to think about her worries and problems, which simply faded away in her mind while the last rays of the afternoon sun entered through the large window and then gave way to the night. The next day. A figure stood in front of the sleeping Gloria, who was breathing rhythmically and calmly. Said figure was that of a 17-year-old teenager with brown hair shaved on the left side, brown eyes, and was wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts. Said teenager was Gloria Martinez, Gloria's daughter. The now known Delia simply stood there watching her mother sleeping peacefully without any apparent concern. "Sigh, oh mom," Delia said with a hint of compassion in her voice as she took the yellow vest and tried to cover her. However, like some kind of owl, the Redeed's eyes opened wide as she stirred a little, causing Delia to be startled by the sudden movement that she hadn't expected. "Bae?" Gloria compassed herself while rubbing her eyes to see her daughter looking at her with some annoyance at being scared. "Ah, good morning," Gloria greeted with her voice somewhat hoarse from sleep. However, Delia did not respond and simply reproached her mother. "I've already told you not to sleep on the couch, go to your bed or you'll get sick," scolded the brunette while the news was heard in the background on an orographic screen. "Yawn, I end up dead after my shift," Gloria tried to reply with a half smile on her face, knowing that her daughter was worried about her. "Well, the washing machine isn't working, did you forget to fix it?" asked Delia, remembering that she was trying to wash the academy uniform until the washing machine broke down. "Yeah, I forgot to fix it, but I'll do it later now that I remember. When did you say you needed to update the devices you use for classes?" Gloria asked the brown-haired girl who sighed. "Sigh, don't worry, I'll talk to Doc to fix it," Delia tried to reassure her. "Fix it?" Gloria asked with narrowed eyes, causing another sigh from the Dahlia. "Sigh, I'll manage," Dahlia said with tiredness in her voice. "I want you to invest well in that tonight. I'm finally going to get paid, so update yourself properly," Gloria warned as she watched Delia put on her academy jacket. "Forget it, you barely have enough for the washing machine," Delia responded with some sarcasm. "It's not true, I just forgot, I'm fine, you just take care of that update," Gloria replied. Yes, whatever you say," Delia replied with disinterest as she finished getting ready. "Are you going to school dressed like that?" Gloria asked, seeing Delia's ragged shape, which only pointed in the direction of the laundry. "My uniform is wet," Delia replied, causing a sigh of glory. At that moment, the two remained silent for a moment, giving way to the voice of the reporter on the news reporting on an attack by a lieutenant colonel who became a cyberpsychopath. However, Delia did not pay attention to the news itself, but rather to the fact that on the holographic screen, a certain Redeed could be seen from behind while she was helping to load some corpses into the ambulance. "Mom? You were on TV. How did it feel? Was it exciting?" Delia asked excitedly as she watched her mother on TV. "It wasn't fun, it was a massacre," Gloria responded with dismay, then turned off the screen. "Go to school now and be very careful," Gloria ordered her daughter, who simply turned around to leave. "Yeah," Delia replied discouragedly as a small red holographic box with a phone symbol appeared in Gloria's view. Almost immediately some text simulating a chat appeared in the Redeed's view, who responded while standing up and walking in the direction of the apartment balcony. "Main Gloria speaking," Gloria replied, distractedly looking at the buildings around her until her gaze was drawn again to a certain blonde who was quietly entering the workshop. However, she couldn't see any further because another text appeared in her vision, which the Redeed proceeded to read with a neutral face and proceed to answer. "Yes, I have it, call me when you come to pick it up," Gloria replied calmly, then turned around to leave, but not before taking an intrigued look in the direction of the workshop, only to see nothing. Change of scene. In the almost dark workshop that Gloria had been curious about a few moments ago, there really wasn't much to see other than the old rickety cars that the blonde owner never bothered to move, either because he was busy or because he simply didn't want to move them. However, curiously, the three-wheeled Mazda that had been placed inside the workshop yesterday was no longer in the now empty space. However, the almost agonizing silence of the workshop made it possible to hear the distinctive sound of metal being welded. If we pay attention carefully, the darkness also made it possible for small lines of light to escape from the hatches that are in the empty space where the Mazda used to be. Entering through the slits in the hatches, a larger and equally dark room could now be seen that was illuminated in momentary lapses of time thanks to the contact of a welding machine with, curiously, the wagon of the three-wheeled Mazda. These small flashes of light also showed that around the place there were multiple quantities of car spare parts, whether tires, rims, fuses, alternators, radiators and many other things. However, the sweaty blonde, with nothing covering his upper body, revealing his athletic body, noticed the incoming call that appeared in his sight, which caused him to stop what he was doing to give priority to the call. "This is Naruto speaking, what do you need?" spoke the curious voice of the now recognized Naruto as he saw the new text that appeared in his sight and then read it calmly while cleaning his hands with a cloth. How much pasta is it?" Naruto asked now with a noticeable tone of happiness in his voice, causing another text message to appear in view and Naruto's calm face to now become a smiling face, while with a movement of his right hand, he put the cloth on his shoulder. "So? Are you joining?" Naruto read the last text message that came in while placing his hand on a wall next to a tool table, causing a small hatch to open in the wall, revealing a small illuminated shelf that now revealed multiple keychains held by small hooks. Taking one seemingly at random, Naruto proceeded to answer. "You doubt it?" Naruto replied with amusement, turning around and approaching a door that led further back to the workshop. Not really, it's just polite to ask, the voice on the call answered while Naruto opened the door, revealing another room a little smaller than the previous one that contained about 4 cars covered with sheets. "Oh well, tell me the time and I'll be there," said Naruto, standing in front of a specific car. "You have 25 minutes to arrive," was the only thing the voice said, while Naruto pressed a button on the keychain, causing some lights to turn on under the sheets and a thunderous roar to resonate in the silent room, and now with the room a little more illuminated, the shirtless blonde could be seen better. Imagine him blonde and with a haircut from the previous image. "I'm on my way," said Naruto, taking off the sheets and then taking the jacket that was on a table and putting it on while with some haste he got into the vehicle, and behind it some doors that led behind the workshop began to open. "Alright, time to make some money," Naruto said to himself as he left the workshop while drifting. Change of scene 3 hours later. "Mrs. Martinez, you have to understand that this is not a question of money," was the voice of a short man with some overweight as he sat at a fine-looking desk while he watched a serious Gloria and Dahlia who looked away. "I understand and I'm sorry for the problems my daughter has caused you," Gloria said, apologizing to the man who didn't react in the slightest. "I understand that Miss Dahlia modified her computer with backdoor software to avoid paying for the license upgrade. With all due respect, this is not behavior worthy of a student," said the apparent director of the academy without even blinking. "It's not a problem, I assure you that we will pay for everything," Gloria replied. "Either way, I think it's prudent for you to reconsider Dahlia's situation," the director said, causing Gloria to narrow her eyes. "What do you mean?" Gloria asked, somewhat annoyed at what the director was about to suggest. "Well, your daughter doesn't seem to fit in with her classmates and she could benefit from a change of scenery. There is no way my daughter has the right to continue studying here, please don't transfer her to another place." The Redeed refused while Dahlia simply listened to the two's discussion. Change of scene. "I told you to do that update right," Gloria scolded as she drove on the highway. "Yeah, I know it was a bad idea to ask my friend for help," Dahlia replied, not really wanting to continue this discussion. "Do you know what you did? You tried to beat the system and now I'm going to have to pay 10 times more than before," the Redeed continued scolding while an expensive-looking car drove on her left. "I'm sorry, okay?" Dahlia apologized. "If you knew it was a bad idea, why did you do it?" Gloria asked. "Because the first time I did it we didn't have any money," Dahlia replied with some annoyance. "Because I was waiting for payday, you know we don't always have that kind of money on hand, stop doing that with your foot," Gloria replied as she watched with annoyance as Dahlia moved her foot rhythmically. "Hey mom, there's something I can't stop thinking about," Dahlia said with a sigh. "What thing?" asked Gloria, listening to what her daughter would say. "Maybe I should stop studying and get a job," Dahlia suggested, causing Gloria to shake her head. "Are you listening to what you're saying?" Gloria asked in disbelief. "I'm serious, you know we can't afford those repairs, besides you have no idea how bad I am in school in general. When you're poor all you find are problems, no matter how hard I try, I'll never be like all those rich kids, and to be honest, I don't even want to be," replied the brown-haired girl, leaving an awkward silence in the car until Gloria spoke again. "So why do I work so hard every hour? I thought I did it all for you, but it seems what I do doesn't make any sense," Gloria asked with a slightly broken voice, while Dahlia could only open her eyes in surprise. "But mom," Dahlia tried to say, but Gloria kept talking. "I knew you were smart and talented, that's why I worked like crazy," said the Redeed while shedding a few tears. "But now I realize that my efforts were just a waste of time, I swear I really tried, I really don't know what I did wrong with you," the Redeed sobbed, causing Dahlia to soften her face. "I talk too much, forget what I said, but please don't cry anymore," Dahlia said calmly. "Do you think I don't know how they treat you at school? That's the same way they treat me at work, but you have to prove who you are and not be influenced by what they say about you," Gloria said as a pickup truck approached from behind on the right side. "Easy to say, doing is another matter," replied Dahlia, looking out the window only to see some kind of heavy rifle pointed in her direction, which caused the brown-haired girl's eyes to open wide, and that's when everything turned into chaos since from one moment to another the two women were in the middle of a shootout, causing several shots to break the windows of Gloria's car, which at this moment was in a state of shock. "The bastards have armored cover," one of the men who had started firing at the other vehicle was heard saying. Accelerating, the two vehicles moved away from the mother and daughter couple who continued driving in a straight line, while they saw now how the same man who spoke took out another weapon that was presumably a missile launcher. "Without wasting time," said man shot, causing the rear of the attacked vehicle to explode into pieces, which also caused it to start spinning until it crashed into Gloria and Dahlia's car, causing it to go out of control and start spinning aggressively until it ended up overturned while the other car exploded. The scene in a few seconds had become a total disaster. The car where Gloria and Dahlia were traveling was overturned on the road, however the only one who stayed in the vehicle was the brunette because the seatbelt kept her inside. However Gloria was not so lucky because thanks to the strong impact the poor redhead in shock was thrown from the vehicle and was left lying in the middle of the road. Now with the drivers of the other vehicle, it wasn't difficult to know that they were dead if the pieces of body everywhere were any indication, thanks to the explosion of the vehicle. In the middle of this chaos, the eyes of a pained Dahlia began to open with shock as she felt her whole world upside down, so looking around the brown-haired girl quickly noticed the body lying on the road, which she quickly recognized as her mother's, thanks to the yellow vest. Fearing it, but Dahlia quickly tried to remove her seatbelt in vain as it remained stuck. Dahlia screamed as she couldn't get out of the overturned vehicle, however the redhead's only response was a slight flinching movement, implying that the woman was still alive. This fact gave some relief to the brunette who again tried to remove her seatbelt, however Dahlia stopped struggling when some lights illuminated the area, and shortly after some people in soldier uniforms appeared in the area and approached the body of the unconscious Gloria. The trauma team said, a relieved Dahlia thinking that they would get out of this situation, however her relief faded when she saw how she scanned her mother, only to hear the following words. "They're not customers," said one of the soldiers neutrally as they walked away from the body without interest. "Hey? What are you doing? Get us out of here," Dahlia shouted in a bit of panic while another soldier scanned her. "He's not a client either," the soldier said again and then began to withdraw from the area as if they had never seen the scene of the two wounded women. "What's wrong with those bastards?" Dahlia said to herself in disbelief as they were left to their fate while she watched the soldiers get on the aircraft and leave the place. However a moan of pain reached her ear, which caused her sight to return to her mother's body, who gave another wince of pain. Mama," whispered Dahlia as tears began to sting her eyes. "Someone help us," Dahlia said to herself, no longer able to continue struggling, and yet another sound reached the desperate Dahlia's ears, so opening her tearful eyes, the brunette could notice that another light began to illuminate the area, a light that was presumably that of a vehicle that she could not see. Shortly after the vehicle door was heard opening. For a few seconds everything remained silent until around 20 shots were heard and then some footsteps approaching the area and revealing a blonde boy whom Dahlia had seen on rare occasions. Said blonde approached the redhead's body and calmly placed his hand on Gloria's jugular and a few moments later removed his hand. "You are the guy from the workshop," Dahlia spoke, drawing the attention of the blonde who had begun to lift the body of the fainted redhead in a bridal style, only to give a smile to the brunette who only looked at him with some pleading for him to help her. Leaving the place, Naruto took Gloria's body, while Dahlia could only hear the sound of a vehicle door opening. Shortly after, Naruto returned to Dahlia and calmly pulled with a little force the door of the overturned car, opening it wide. Then Naruto took out a small knife with which he cut the belt and carefully took out a Dahlia, who discovered that her body could only tremble at the shock of the situation, so lifting her equally in a bridal style, Naruto took her to his Lamborghini. Distractedly, Dahlia noticed a body lying right next to the car on the passenger side of which her mother was now. Heading into the driver's side with her sitting on his lap because his car only had capacity for 2 people, Naruto started the car and proceeded to leave the scene before the authorities arrived and thought he had something to do with the accident. To be honest, Naruto really never thought he would find these two there, since Naruto had only approached to leave the corpse that was next to his car and think that he was just another victim of the accident. But well, as some people say, the world really is small. 25 minutes before. The streets in the urban area of Night City were an area that really wasn't very crowded by people or the police, that made it perfect for groups of people to be able to hold clandestine events like the groups of today that were dedicated to holding clandestine races where a large amount of money circulated. However, it seems that today there was a snitch at the party, a snitch who invited the authorities to the party. It is for this reason that now all the people dispersed from the place either with their friends or with their personal vehicles. From among the place, a distinctive Lamborghini came out at full speed to avoid being caught by the authorities. Note: I really liked the video. Honestly, I was only able to win 50 grand, what a disappointment, a disappointed Naruto said to himself as he looked at the numbers in his bank account, which consisted of about $375,000. Thank goodness I won the Toyota Supra from that stupid amateur. Oh. Listen to that classic, Naruto said to himself while listening to the music on the radio and then turning up the volume while doing a long drift in a large parking area and coincidentally seeing the car he won. Speaking of the devil, look at that beautiful piece of Motherbik. Naruto said to himself only to scream in disbelief as he saw the car being intercepted by a patrol car. With a forced smile, Naruto tried not to lose his temper as he continued drifting. However, more patrol cars quickly appeared and ran over the car. Hey, my car, you bastard sons of bitches. Naruto shouted without any qualms, seeing how his car was being run over without compassion, and distractedly a tire with rims that presumably belonged to the Supra flew out of the mass of swirling cars, so lowering the window of his car Naruto stuck out half of his body while shouting curses at the police and giving them the middle finger. "Bastards. Stop crashing my car, you bucking pieces of shit." Naruto shouted to stop drifting and leave the place. Getting into the car again, Naruto now sobbing comically. For a moment the car remained silent until a voice caught the attention of the blonde, who turned to look at the passenger seat. "Are you okay?" asked a guy while looking at Naruto nervously. Our blonde protagonist simply stared at the guy for a few seconds until he finally spoke. "Who the hell are you?" Naruto asked a strange guy in his car, who simply scratched the back of his neck in nervousness. "Oh well, it turns out that in all the chaos I ended up getting into your car by accident," the man responded, to which Naruto simply looked at him calmly, since in itself the excuse seemed simply stupid. Nevertheless he would play along. "This must be fate wanting us to become friends," Naruto said with a smile on his face as he extended his hand to the man, who took it with a smile of his own. However, not long after they held hands, gunshots were heard in the distance, causing three eyes to appear on the unknown guy's head, while Naruto just stared at the now lifeless body of the guy. "Or maybe not," Naruto said to himself, letting go of the corpse's hand and now looking in the rearview mirror, he saw some cars chasing him, cars that Naruto recognized as the ones he had beaten. "What bad losers, this is already becoming very routine," Naruto said to himself with annoyance, and then accelerated while he searched the car's handle until he grabbed the handle of a gun. "Okay, who's playing dirty? Well, let's play," Naruto said to himself, lowering the car window once more and taking a curve with an expert drift. Naruto took his gun out the window to continue shooting with incredible precision. He shot each of the drivers several times, some in the head and others in some part of the body. However, it was enough for the cars to collide with each other and stop following him. However, they not only collided, but they also caught fire, causing one of the cars to explode and consequently the others to explode into pieces as well. "Okay, I didn't plan on that," Naruto said to himself with a flat face at the luck he had this time. "Well, it seems like it's just you and me now," Naruto said to himself as he caressed his slightly damaged car as he pulled out onto the road. "Okay, where do I leave you?" Naruto said to himself, seeing the corpse still in the passenger seat. Naruto was sincerely grateful that the asshole had more chrome on his head than flesh, because if it hadn't been like that, the bastard would have gotten his car dirty with a lot of blood. Coming out of his thoughts, Naruto noticed a small shine on the guy's jacket, which caught his attention. So, searching through the jacket, Naruto took out the familiar police medal that made Naruto frown. "But look who we have here, so you were the idiot who was Jewish at the whole party," the blonde said to himself. However, something else caught the blonde's attention, so looking ahead Naruto now noticed how further ahead there was some kind of car accident. Distractedly Naruto noticed how the trauma team was moving away from the place, so smiling Naruto approached the area of the accident and stopped a few meters from the place. "Very well, sir, police, unfortunately, you died in a car accident," said Naruto, getting out of his car and then taking out the body of his companion. For a moment, Naruto was going to turn around and leave until he remembered something, and that was that because of this bastard, his hard-won car would have been safe and sound. So, pointing his gun at the corpse, Naruto proceeded to shoot what was left in his pistol. "Jump, damn imbecile," Naruto said to himself as he looked away at the group of burning cars until a lump moved in the middle of the road. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto approached the neon yellow lump, only to see that redeed he had seen the day before, so taking the blood fluid in the jugular Naruto knew that the woman was still alive. For a moment Naruto weighed the idea of leaving her there and not getting into trouble. However, the woman hadn't done anything wrong to him, and well, the woman is hexy, so it would be a shame to let her die. So taking her bridal style Naruto was about to take her away until he heard someone speak, so looking in the direction of the voice, Naruto noticed a teenager stuck in an old car that Naruto remembered was the Redeed's car, so assuming that the teenager was an acquaintance of the woman Naruto took the Redeed, and I go back to look for the teenager who was shaking uncontrollably. Present. Naruto now continued driving relatively calmly in the direction of some hospital, however he remembered that for the two girls to be treated, they had to be in a hospital where both were insured, so slightly moving the teenager sitting on his legs Naruto spoke. "Hey, which hospital are you insured at?" Naruto asked the trembling girl, who answered with a somewhat broken voice. "At the Rancho Coronado Clinic in Santo Domingo," the girl replied, to which Naruto nodded, knowing where the place was, since it was relatively close to where the two lived, so Naruto accelerated and proceeded to go to the indicated place, while he felt the brown-haired girl relax her body, indicating that she had fallen asleep. 13 minutes later. Naruto skidded in front of the clinic, calling the attention of the doctor who was looking through a window. Naruto quickly got out with the brunette now on his shoulders and then opened the passenger side door to grab the redeed as best he could and then enter the clinic where they were treated as quickly as possible. For a moment Naruto simply stood there watching as the two girls were taken away on a stretcher until Naruto simply chose to turn around and leave the place. However, a voice behind him called him. "Excuse me, are you an acquaintance, Mrs. Martinez?" asked the doctor in charge of the clinic, causing Naruto to turn to look at him. "Not really, I just found them on the road," Naruto answered simply while the doctor looked at him with interest until he saw the vehicle in which the teenager came in front of him and he couldn't help but smile passing through his mind and then he saw some papers where the information of the two women who were now attending were. "I think it's necessary for you to know that the family doctor's plan is the standard," the doctor commented while Naruto simply stared at him. "So?" Naruto asked, to which the doctor continued talking. "Well, the girl is actually just sleeping, but Mrs. Martinez will die in a few hours at best," said the doctor while looking at Naruto who already knew where the conversation was going. Unless the doctor was going to continue speaking, however Naruto interrupted him. "Unless I pay for a better plan," said Naruto, looking back at the doctor who smiled at what the blonde said. "I see you understand the situation," said the doctor with a smile that Naruto decided to ignore in favor of thinking about the matter. To be honest, he didn't know if he should help the two women, but once again today had been a long day full of many events, so Naruto at this moment just wanted to lie down in his bed. Also, how expensive could a new medical plan cost? So sighing, Naruto proceeded to ask the question. So? How much is the new plan?" Naruto asked, to which the doctor's smile increased. "The platinum plan, which costs $120,000, is necessary," said the doctor, leaving an awkward silence between the blonde and the doctor, who simply looked at each other. "Are you kidding me? I'd better shoot you in the head and take you to another hospital," Naruto said angrily, seeing the leech in front of him. "Well, that's how things are," said the doctor now a little nervously, since he may have gone overboard with the price, since the platinum plan cost $50,000. "Forget it, I'm going to take them somewhere else," said Naruto, starting to walk to the room where they had the two women. However, the doctor got in his way. How about I give you a discount and leave it at half price?" said the doctor, to which Naruto, still frowning, stared at him for a moment until he finally accepted. "Very well, $60,000 it will be, and I hope you don't let them die or else I'll come looking for you and you'll wish you had wanted to scam me," said Naruto, making the doctor understand that he knew he was scamming him. Then Naruto proceeded to make the transfer to the doctor, who nodded. "Yes, sir," replied the doctor, entering the room to attend to the girls. On the other hand, Naruto turned around and left the place. After all, he had a car to recover and repair, so getting into his car, Naruto proceeded to go in search of the car he had won. The plan was actually quite simple. This consisted of intercepting the crane that was carrying his car and taking it to his workshop, a fairly simple but effective plan. That's why after about 27 minutes Naruto now found himself following a tow truck that was currently in the desert outside the city. Standing next to the tow truck, Naruto simply shot at the door where the driver should be, and not long after the tow truck stopped. Getting out of his car, Naruto approached the tow truck and then opened the door and saw the body of the dead driver. In reality, Naruto wasn't surprised. After all, this was a simple tow truck without any improvements as far as armor was concerned, so the bullets would easily pass through. Taking out the corpse, Naruto proceeded to put the Lamborghini also on the crane and then left the place. For a moment, Naruto walked calmly on his way until he remembered something. "Oh right, I almost forgot," Naruto said to himself, then took a cable out of his pocket and connected it to the right side of his neck, then connected the other end to a slot next to the crane's radio. A few seconds passed until Naruto finally nodded as he disconnected the cable. Now you'll be wondering what Naruto did. Well, the answer is quite simple, since every crane or vehicle that belonged to a company or the government had GPS, so Naruto simply deactivated the GPS so they wouldn't know where he was. Coming out of his silent thought, an incoming call appeared in Naruto's sight, who simply saw the name of the one calling him, only to become more serious than usual. "This is Naruto speaking, what do you want?" Naruto asked calmly to hear what they would say next. "I have a job for you," was the only thing said by the voice on the call, while Naruto just kept driving until he decided to ask. "What are we talking about?" Naruto asked, to which the voice replied. $150,000, the voice answered, leaving Naruto pensive, since although it was a lot of money, the expenses involved in carrying out the work, whether in refractions, weapons, ammunition, etc., in the end the money would be reduced, but it was still a lot of money. "Send me the details," Naruto said, cutting the call as he looked in the rearview mirror and saw the destroyed car with a smile. "It seems that you and I are going to have a lot of time together, so I hope for a very good friendship," Naruto said with a relaxed smile as he drove towards his workshop. Chapter 2. 10:15 p.m. Clink clink were the clinking sounds that could be heard in the dimly lit workshop belonging to a certain blonde who was currently sitting on a somewhat worn sofa in front of a television. Absent-mindedly a couple of crimson drops crashed onto the dirty floor of the workshop, followed by a piece of lead that we already know was a bullet. However, that was not the only one that fell, since after that a couple more bullets fell, causing more blood to spill on the floor. Bucking hell, so much fuss just for a bucking suitcase. What the hell must it be for it to be worth $150,000? Naruto said to himself with annoyance as he looked at a blood-stained briefcase next to a severed arm that was held together with handcuffs. Finishing removing the 5 bullets that were lodged in his body, Naruto dropped heavily into the couch while huffing in annoyance. Honestly, if I hadn't changed my lungs to chrome ones, I would most likely be dead right now, Naruto said to himself tiredly, since although Naruto didn't like replacing parts of his body, unless if they were an extremity of his body, Naruto liked having his own body and continue feeling things with them. However, Naruto saw these chrome lungs as necessary due to the life he was leading. What these lungs did was exponentially increase his rhythm and consequently not get tired so quickly. That is why his body was in such an athletic and strong state, since no matter how many things he didn't get tired as quickly as before. Aside from those lungs, Naruto's body was completely organic and it was not necessary for him to use those immunosuppressants that they created so that people would not become cyberpsychopaths. But well, leaving the matter aside, Naruto took some kind of transparent plastic gauze that he proceeded to place in the holes in his back. Once placed, these automatically adhered to the body and then began to turn blue while letting out a small steam from them. Lying down on the couch, Naruto took a controller that was next to him and then started playing on one of the latest video game consoles that came out, the PlayStation 19 Pro, with 85 terabytes of space, a bandwidth of 65 terabytes per second, and 150 teraflops. Well, Naruto could spend a whole day talking about the specifications of the console, but he left that aside just to complain in annoyance when a bastard camper killed him. Honestly, you have a NASA console and you're just going to camp? Damn idiot, I'll kill him right now, was what an annoyed Naruto said as he reappeared on the map and proceeded to play on the map that has existed for many generations in this game. That's the iconic Nuketown. Coming from behind the bastard camper who hadn't even noticed his presence, Naruto unloaded the full magazine of his Thompson ARX 579 rifle with radioactive camouflage prime. Damn faggot, now I'm not going to leave you for the whole game, Naruto said amusedly and then went to look for him at the camper again. However, some knocks on the doors of his workshop, along with a voice calling, caught his attention, and as if his life depended on it, Naruto quickly took out a heavy rifle from under the sofa and then began to walk silently in the direction of the doors while he heard the voice scream. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The voice on the other end called with some curiosity, and when he was about to speak again, the doors suddenly opened while Naruto pointed his large rifle at the head of a shocked brown-haired girl who could only gasp at what was happening. "Who the buck are you and what are you?" Naruto said seriously, only to soften his face when he saw a shocked Dahlia who was wearing her mother's neon yellow jacket. So lowering the rifle from the poor girl's face, Naruto proceeded to speak. "What are you doing here? Dr. Leech didn't tell me you had been discharged," Naruto said as he distractedly looked at the large blood stain on Dahlia's back. Well, I left a few hours ago," and the brunette was going to say until she noticed that Naruto had a couple of scratches on his body. The most noticeable one was on his left eyebrow. "You're hurt," Dahlia said to Naruto, who raised an eyebrow and simply ran a finger over his left eyebrow just to clean a small line of blood. "Oh, this? It's nothing really, it will heal soon," Naruto responded with apparent disinterest. "So? Are you going somewhere?" Naruto asked curiously, to which the brunette remained silent for a moment until she answered. "No, actually I just came from talking to some people," Dahlia replied as she remembered the fact that she had gotten the backbone of a dangerous guy after supposedly becoming friends with a white-haired girl who simply kept her clothes only to end up making a deal with a dangerous guy. Certainly things had been quite hectic for the brown-haired girl who was currently clenching her fists. "I am too pathetic and useless, right?" Dahlia said suddenly while Naruto dedicated himself to listening to what the girl said, who little by little began to sob. "Because of me, now my mom is hospitalized. I was expelled from the academy that my mom had worked so hard for me to study. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were wasted on someone like me who ruined everything. Now I implanted this thing in my back that ended up being from some guys who bought it from my mother. I don't know what to do anymore," said the brunette, while Naruto simply watched as the girl emotionally collapsed before his eyes. So sighing, Naruto spoke. "You shouldn't worry so much about the matter, you're not pathetic, much less useless," said Naruto, trying to comfort the girl while placing a hand on the brunette's head. Nothing that happened is your fault. 90% of the things that happen in each person's life cannot be controlled. After all, there are hundreds of thousands of probabilities of events that can happen in a moment while they spin in a random roulette. We live a life full of dangers, so enjoy every second you have of life, Naruto finished saying while tears fell from Dahlia's eyes. A few seconds later, Naruto removed his hand from Dahlia's head, only for the girl to rush at him in a hug while she cried hard. Not really knowing what to do, Naruto simply chose to stay still while Dahlia took out her sorrows on his polished, muscular, and well-formed chest. Naruto, you're such a hot tie, Naruto said to himself mentally, allowing himself to be a little narcissistic, something he almost never did, but oh well, Naruto just stood there stroking the sobbing Dahlia's hair. A couple of minutes later, the brunette separated from Naruto while she dried the rest of the tears on her cheeks. Well, I'm going to go home to sleep. Oh, and by the way, thank you so much for paying for the hospital. I swear that somehow I'm going to pay you back, said Dahlia to turn around and start to leave, leaving behind a calm Naruto who simply went back into the workshop. I guess I'm going to sleep too, Naruto said to himself, a little tired, getting ready to take a good bath. The next day 3:30 p.m. Damn shitty cops, they really showed off this time, Naruto said to himself as he got out from under the Toyota Supra he had won a few days ago. Naruto calmly inspected the carburetor in his hand, only to drop it with a bunch of other parts. Another useless piece, damn it, you're going to cost me a fortune. Of course that would be it if I didn't already have most of the pieces, Naruto said calmly, however an incoming call appeared in his sight, so calmly Naruto answered. Naruto speaking, Naruto replied. Do you have the package? The voice on the call asked, showing no sign of interest at all, but then again, the voice always had that tone, so you'd hardly know if something would interest the voice. What do you think? Naruto responded scathingly to the voice that nodded. Okay, bring him to this place at 11:30 p.m, the voice replied, while a holographic screen appeared in Naruto's view, pointing to a specific place on the map. Very well, I'll be there, Naruto replied, and then hung up the call, and the deposit of $150,000 appeared in his bank account. Okay, I might as well go out and buy the remaining spare parts, Naruto said to himself, turning around and starting to leave, but not before seeing the destroyed car out of the corner of his eye. I'm going to run again, so wait for me, said Naruto to take a keychain from the shelf and leave the workshop, leaving a silent workshop with some scarce rays of sunlight entering through some windows. Scene change 7:40 p.m. Leaving her apartment was a somewhat happy Dahlia as she went to a certain place to celebrate with her new coworkers, so to speak, since today she had carried out her first mission, so leaving the parking area Dahlia prepared to go in the direction they had told her, but not before looking at the workshop with one of the roller doors open, which obviously indicated that Naruto was there. Thinking for a moment if she should call him to talk, the brunette mentally debated which would be the best option. To begin with, for her Naruto seemed like a guy who was easy to talk to, and certainly his company was somewhat fun due to the few sarcastic comments and some jokes he told this morning when she spoke casually with him about his mother's condition. However, on the other hand, where she was going she would meet her new coworkers and she didn't know how they would react if she brought someone they didn't know. However, once again this was just a small party, so it couldn't be so bad to take him with her, so plucking up her courage, the brown-haired girl entered the workshop and then approached the double doors that were at the back and quietly knocked on them in a rhythmic way that Naruto told her to do if she wanted to talk to him. Waiting for a few seconds, Dahlia finally heard the footsteps approaching the doors, which began to open quietly to reveal Naruto, who had a piece of pizza in his mouth. Oh Dahlia, what do you need? Naruto asked calmly while chewing the piece of pizza. Oh well, I wanted to ask you if you wanted to go to a parking lot to celebrate my first job done, invited the brunette. Well, Naruto swallowed the food in his mouth and thought about the invitation. He could go after delivering the package to his contact, so he nodded and said. Note. In my country, Panama, we call parking a meeting with friends where they obviously drink and play music and all that stuff. Okay, where is the meeting? Naruto replied, giving the brunette a tender smile, who nodded and then sent the location to Naruto, who saw it on the holographic screen, only to blink a couple of times when he recognized the location as the place where he was going to meet his contact. Okay, then I'll see you there, said Dahlia, ready to leave, only to stop when Naruto's voice called her. Wait, come in, I'll take you, said Naruto entering the workshop, while the brown-haired girl stared at the entrance in surprise, since she had certainly wondered what the place would be like inside. However, she hadn't asked about the matter, since she had only known Naruto for a couple of days, so she didn't want to be so nosy. Entering through the doors, the brunette could only see the large number of pieces in different parts of the place, arranged next to the pieces of the same kind. The workshop itself was quite tidy, however it was somewhat dirty, although of course Dahlia wouldn't give it so much thought since it was a workshop after all, it was supposed to be dirty. Looking at a corner, the brown-haired girl could see a sofa that looked at a holographic television that was projecting the new open-world role-playing game that came out not many days ago. This obviously indicated that Naruto had been playing a few moments ago. Honestly, Dahlia had to resist the urge to take the controller and stay and play instead of going to the party, but she certainly contained herself well, thanks to the fact that her sight was now on the piece of metal that had once been a car. What happened to that car? Dahlia asked curiously, while Naruto finished turning off his console and answered the brunette's question. Well, the little girl suffered a terrible accident, but there's nothing to worry about because I'm going to bring her back to life, Naruto said with a smile on his face, then opened the keychain shelf, and before taking a keychain, Naruto decided to leave the decision to the girl. Hey Dahlia, which of the 4 keys do you choose? Naruto asked, drawing the brunette's attention, who turned her gaze to the 4 keys hanging lazily on the shelf. I don't know the second one. He said and asked Dahlia, to which Naruto nodded. Very good, you have good taste, I like it. Well, let's go, we have a party to go to, said Naruto, knowing that with any car he had chosen, he would have told him that he had good taste, after all they were his cars. Oh, and by the way, do you like speed? Naruto asked with amusement, to which Dahlia didn't know how to respond. Yeah, I guess, Dahlia replied, making Naruto smile even bigger. Scene change 8:15. In a restaurant bar, there were some people hanging out celebrating while listening to music and drinking until their bodies no longer responded, however their celebration stopped when they heard the familiar sound of a car skidding. So turning their gaze to the street in a straight line that was in front of the small square in which they were all, they could see how a car appeared skidding in the curve that was at the end of the street, while the sound of the turbo could be heard resonating in the street, along with the occasional flame that the car emitted in the exhaust pipe on the engine cover and on the sides every time it changed revolutions. Giving one last skid, the car entered through the narrow entrance of the square, stopping in front of the group of people who looked at it with curiosity and surprise. The car letting out a few last flames through the exhaust pipe. The modified Mercedes 300 SL coupe turned off, and then the driver's door opened as if they were wings, and from inside appeared a blonde teenager that no one present had seen before. Closing the door quickly, Naruto approached a bar next to a short girl with grayish skin, pale green hair tied in 2 pigtails, golden eyes with crimson red skeletal, and wearing a somewhat large vest that was a little below her buttocks. Hello. Give me a crown please, Naruto asked the bartender, who nodded while the other people at the party dismissed the presence of the new individual at the expense of continuing to drink and have a good time. For a moment Naruto gave a slight glance to the girl next to him, who looked at him with curiosity in her eyes. Now giving him a more direct look, the two stared at each other until the little loli decided to speak. You're a hexy blonde, said the loli to Naruto, who smiled mischievously. Oh? I must admit that you look hot too, Naruto replied, giving the loli a flirtatious smile. My name is Rebecca, but my friends call me Becca. Who are you? Asked the now recognized Rebecca. My name is Naruto, but to you I am whatever you want. Naruto introduced himself, making Rebecca giggle while the bartender placed a beer Naruto ordered in front of him. Greetings. Naruto suggested, to which Rebecca responded by clinking her own beer with the blondes. Let's get drunk until we pass out, said Rebecca, and then drink with Naruto. Not long after, Naruto's car door opened, calling the attention of the couple and some of those present, more specifically the now companions of a certain brown movie. Dahlia came out of the car already recovered from the dizziness she had a few moments ago. Oh? Are you Dahlia's friend? Rebecca asked curiously as she watched Dahlia approach them. Well, I helped her and her mother a few days ago. Sometimes she comes to visit me and we talk about anything, so you could say that we are friends, Naruto answered to Rebecca's question, who simply nodded while taking another sip of his beer. Are you insane? How can you drive like that? Asked a recovered Dahlia as she leaned on the bar. Hey, don't exaggerate, the trip wasn't that bad, calm down and have a drink, said Naruto, while signaling the bartender to bring another beer. You know I'm still a minor, right? Dahlia said with a flat face as she looked at the bottle in front of her. Very well, take it if you want, if not, well, I'll drink it myself, but remember you only live once, said Naruto, finishing his bottle and turning to look at the bartender again. Hey honey, bring Rebecca and me the strongest drinks you have, Naruto said with a foxy grin, while Rebecca smiled and then leaned close to the blonde while gently elbowing Naruto in the ribs. Are you sure about this? I can be a bit out of control when I'm drunk, Rebecca commented, causing Naruto to smile back and bow down to her level. I think I can handle you, Naruto replied. I hope so, because I would feel bad if you were just another pretty face, said Rebecca, bringing her face closer to the blonde who didn't back down at all. Believe me, you'll be surprised at how skilled I can be, Naruto replied, bringing his face closer to the point where they could both feel each other's breath. In that case I'll be in your care honey, he responded in the same way, only for some rather noisy sipping to catch his attention, so turning their gaze the couple could see a Dahlia who was eagerly swallowing the contents of the beer that Naruto had invited her. Okay, I might as well take responsibility for both of us, Naruto commented, turning his gaze to his short companion, who was pouring a trio of shots in small glasses, then handing two to Naruto who took them, then handing one to Dahlia who looked at the small glass with curiosity. This isn't going to do anything to me, right? The brunette asked, only for Naruto to place the shot next to her, while waving his hand in disdain. Don't worry, the drink won't do anything to you and what could go wrong? Then 55 p.m. Hahaha. Let's go Naruto accelerate. Was the shout of a smiling Rebecca as she leaned out the driver's window, giving a great view to the blonde who didn't hesitate to please the lowly to accelerate while skidding for the umpteenth time in front of the square where the party was. However, unlike before, now you could see a noticeable number of people making a large circle around while other people with cars joined in to skid. Yes. Let's go faster. Shouted now brown-haired while holding a bottle of the strongest alcohol that the small bar could provide, and like Rebecca, this one also looked out the window. Having an idea, Naruto quickly grabbed Rebecca by the waist, forcing her to get into the car and making her sit on his crotch. "Oh, if you wanted to feel my ass so much, you should have asked me," Rebecca said with a drunken blush, causing Naruto to just smile at her. "I like a little aggressive, but you better get ready both of you," said Naruto, calling the girl's attention, so that from one moment to another Naruto opened the door and skidding as close to the people as he could, Naruto extended his hand together, and as if everyone present understood what he wanted to do, they extended their hands too, causing Naruto to start high-fiving the public, appearing in the middle of Rebecca and Naruto. A smiling Dahlia imitated Naruto's actions, followed by the lowly herself. Giving a couple more turns, Naruto stopped in the middle of the circle. Clouded by the constant skidding, Naruto proceeded to accelerate the engine, causing fire to come out of the exhausts. "This is the best party of my entire life," said a happy Dahlia, and then took another big gulp from the bottle, making Naruto smile at what the brunette said. To be honest, Naruto had encouraged her to drink because the few times he had spoken to the brunette, which were actually very few, Naruto knew that she was drowning in problems, so why make her not think about the matter with a little alcohol? Well, considering the amount she had been drinking, it certainly wasn't a little anymore. Leaving the circle of people, Naruto parked the vehicle next to the car of a rather corpulent dark-skinned guy with dark glasses who was simply drinking beer calmly. Naruto actually learned from Dahlia that this guy's name was Main, and from what he said, this guy was the apparent leader of the group for which he now worked. "You really made a mess, brat," Main commented with a smile as she watched Naruto getting out of the car, leaving a very drunk Rebecca in the driver's seat. "Well, you see, you have to enjoy it while you can," Naruto replied, leaning against his car and then taking the bottle that was held by an equally drunk Dahlia, who leaned on the shoulder of the blonde, who proceeded to take a large gulp of alcohol. This shit is good," Naruto said with intoxicated joy. However, the sighting of a familiar car for the two caught the attention of Naruto and Main, who turned their eyes in that direction, only to see an expensive car that only people of high socioeconomic status used. Stopping in front of the two, the doors of the fine car opened, so that shortly after a white-haired man with 3 eyes on his right side and one on his left and dressed in a wine-red sack suit got out of the car. Faraday," Main said with a hint of annoyance as he approached the man now known as Faraday, and at the same time the atmosphere became a little tense. "If I remember correctly, what I requested was navigation data, not the entire limousine," Faraday complained, not really showing his annoyance at the results of the work. "We got the data you asked for," Main replied almost immediately. "The conditions of the work were to obtain the data without the other party noticing," Faraday complained again, now showing a bit of his annoyance. "We tried, but you know how things are, not everything goes as expected," Main replied without taking a step back from the small argument. "It was imperative that you discover Tanaka's routines and routes," Faraday demanded, but Main responded. "And if you analyze the data you will have it," Main responded, followed by an awkward silence between the two, if not until a certain blonde decided to interrupt the two with a strong sip of alcohol. "Shit, I'm out," Naruto said to himself and then threw the bottle, which landed in a trash can. Feeling the pair of eyes on him, Naruto simply looked back at them with a flat face. "What? Oh right, your package," Naruto said with a noticeably drunk voice. "Huh? What package?" asked a curious Rebecca who peeked out from inside the car. However, Naruto couldn't stand the itch in his throat, so with a smile he answered. "This package?" Naruto replied with amusement, causing the green-haired girl to remain for a moment processing the answer until, with an equally mischievous smile, she moved her hand quickly to grab Naruto's crotch. "Oh? Is this package for me? But I don't think I can handle such a package on my own," Rebecca said with feigned innocence as she massaged the certainly enormous package Naruto was carrying between his legs. "Don't worry, we'll fix it there," Naruto suggested, then cleared his throat and with the greatest seriousness he could muster in that situation, which wasn't much, as he still felt the lowly's hand on his member. No, but seriously, take your package, Naruto said, putting his upper body in the car over a smiling Rebecca and searching under the seat and managing to pull out a blood-stained briefcase with his severed hand still attached to it. Take it, said Naruto, handing the briefcase to Faraday, who looked at it for a moment until he finally took it while nodding to Naruto and looked back at Main. Thanks to the remarkable work you did, Tanaka is now on high alert, which puts us back at square one, Faraday added, before turning around and getting into his car, but not before seeing Naruto. Oh, and by the way, I need you to work with Main's group from now on. Maybe next time they won't be able to do the job right, Faraday ordered, receiving a shrug, closing the door. Faraday left the place, leaving a silent Naruto and Main. Well, it will be a pleasure to work with you, said Naruto, extending his hand to Main, who received it seriously. Don't get too confident, you haven't joined the group yet, so for now consider yourself on probation, Main responded to Naruto, who raised an eyebrow at what he said, since he really didn't plan on joining the group. However, he didn't feel like arguing and just let it go. Hey Naruto, why don't you take us home and do whatever you want to us, was heard the voice of a flirtatious Rebecca, making both Naruto and Main turn to see the interior of the car in which Rebecca and Dahlia were snuggled up, while the first one was groping the second one, who let out slight moans of apparent pleasure, so turning her gaze towards the strong Naruto simply said. Well, you see, duty calls, said Naruto, getting into his car and then starting it with a roar of the machine and proceeding to leave the place, leaving behind a smiling Main. Treat them well, brat, was the only thing Main said. Scene break. Driving on the highway at 180 kilometers, there was a Naruto while he was carrying a brunette girl on his back while receiving the rookie kisses of the same one, that being her first time. Her kisses were somewhat clumsy, however Naruto would not pressure her so much and would simply let the girl advance at her pace while he would show her little by little how it was done. However, Naruto's legs slid, pressing the accelerator more when he felt the sensation of warm humidity on his member. So taking a look in that direction, Naruto could see Rebecca with her head buried in his crotch while she sucked like an expert. Buck, have you done this before? Naruto asked with a certain degree of satisfaction as he watched Rebecca pull back until she pulled his cock completely out of her mouth and then put on a cute pout. What are you insinuating? Rebecca asked with false annoyance. However, the green-haired girl received no response and instead felt Naruto's hand rest on her head and then guide her back to his crotch, while with the other arm he took Dahlia by the buttocks to lift her a little so that Naruto could then see how the brunette spilled the alcoholic drink from her certainly somewhat generous breasts. This sight with the sensation of Rebecca's blowjob was undoubtedly a moment to remember. So accelerating with more force, Naruto buried his face in the brunette's breasts while drinking the alcohol that went down them. 25 minutes later. The roll-up doors of a certain dark workshop began to open somewhat slowly, however, once they were opened wide, Naruto's Mercedes-Benz 300 SL coupe entered abruptly, letting out a loud screech from its worn tires. For a moment the car simply stayed there as the engine was turned off. However, after 10 seconds and a curious wobble of the car, the doors opened, allowing a Naruto to emerge holding a whimpering brunette by the thighs while grinding his hips against the brunette's butt, who could only moan at the new intrusion inside her, followed by the two. A blushing Rebecca staggered out of the car while drinking from a new bottle of alcohol. However, before the green-haired girl could swallow the liquid down her throat, she was lifted by Naruto's arm as he supported Dahlia's back against the back of the car. So, lifting Rebecca up to his face, Naruto proceeded to give her the hottest kiss the green-haired girl had ever imagined, while she absent-mindedly felt the drink slowly being sucked out of her mouth. Parting his lips, Naruto was going to give the thrust a little longer than normal, however, the movement did not go as he wanted, which caused his long member to come out of the hot cavity of the brunette, who was panting in exhaustion. Barely noticing the brunette's tiredness, Naruto mentally decided to move the fun elsewhere, so with the brunette still on his back and with his left hand acting as a position for Rebecca, Naruto headed to the workshop's bedroom. 1 minute later. Naruto dropped his two lovers on the somewhat large bed due to Naruto occasionally moving in his sleep, deciding to feel new waters. Naruto approaches a smiling Rebecca, who upon seeing his approach did not hesitate to wrap her hands around Naruto's neck while she opened her certainly meaty legs to reveal a bulking tight-looking pussy. For a moment Naruto wondered if he would break the lowly-looking woman. However, the alcohol running through his veins did the job and diverted his thoughts to how surely good it would feel to be in there. That is why Naruto was now lining the tip of his cock in the incredibly tight pussy, while the green-haired girl clenched her teeth, feeling the pressure that made its way into her canal. Opening her eyes as wide as she could, Rebecca couldn't believe what she was feeling at this moment, since at this moment the green-haired woman felt as if she were a virgin again, although she had had relations occasionally, and when she said occasional, she meant that she could count them with the fingers of one hand. However, her thoughts went away when she felt the first thrust, which caused Rebecca to grab the sheets tightly. Not wanting to leave the brunette in oblivion, Naruto pulled Dahlia to then lift her by the thighs and with great eagerness, began to devour the teenage pussy of the brunette who opened her eyes with pure pleasure marked on her face. Instinctively the brunette wrapped her thighs around Naruto's head who did not stop in his thrusts and his constant toying with Dahlia's vagina, who already felt her fourth release. As I'm Kumings, the brunette moaned while Naruto felt the walls of Rebecca's pussy squeeze so softly that Naruto felt like he went to heaven and came back only for Rebecca to forcefully roll Naruto's hips and let out an almost animalistic moan as a clear indication of his coming, while a new feeling of pleasure took hold of Naruto, who continued to release a large load inside the loli, who felt the scorching heat in her uterus. Note: well, from what I see, this image doesn't break any of Wattpad's rules, that is, it doesn't show anything indecent, so let's hope they don't delete it. I also know that more than one person has seen this video. Slowly sliding his member inside the panting green-haired girl, Naruto finally pulled out the entire length of his cock, allowing a large amount of his sperm to spill out of Rebecca's interior, letting the equally panting brunette fall next to Rebecca. Naruto slowly proceeded to position himself between the brunette's legs, causing Rebecca's eyes to widen in surprise. "Can you still continue?" Rebecca asked as she watched the cock enter Dahlia's vagina, who let out a loud moan while smiling. Naruto leaned over Rebecca's sweaty face while giving her a light kiss and then whispering, "I told you no that you would be surprised at how powerful he could be," Naruto replied to resume the party of attacks and giving them the best night of their lives. The next day 12 p.m. In a somewhat dark room illuminated by a few rays of light that filtered through a small window, you could see a certain blonde sleeping peacefully while he wrapped an arm around the waist of a naked Dahlia, who curiously had her breast in the mouth of the blonde who sucked it like a baby. Next to Naruto was an equally naked Rebecca, who was still holding the now flaccid member in her tied and used pussy. However, our favorite blonde began to open his eyes tiredly, so taking the pink nipple out of his mouth and carefully removing the small weight from above, Naruto got out of bed and without bothering to put on any clothes, Naruto left the room in the direction of the living room, quite clean and tidy despite the state he was in outside in the workshop. With his vision blurred by sleep, Naruto proceeded to take the figure that stood in front of him and fluidly proceeded to give him a chaste morning kiss while giving him a squeeze on the buttocks. "Good morning doll no rebaya," whatever Naruto said quite sleepily as he opened the fridge and took out a bottle of soda to drink it and feel the sting of the gas, along with the sugary caffeine on his palates. Now taking out a few pieces of pizza, Naruto placed them on a plate and then put them in the microwave. Once done, Naruto watched as the pieces of pizza continued to spin like a zombie. Turning to look distractedly at the figure that he had kissed a moment ago and that curiously hadn't moved a single inch, Naruto noticed that she was somewhat tall to be Rebecca and yet her hair was too white to be Dahlia's. Walking slowly to the sink, Naruto proceeded to rinse his face to remove the dirt and drowsiness, so looking once more in the direction of the figure, Naruto could now better see the curvy figure of a girl with short white hair above her shoulders and a longer lock falling to the left side of her face. Said girl was wearing an equally wide outfit with black details. Once Naruto could get a good look at the person in front of him, who looked like some kind of lifeless mannequin, while his face had contorted into one of surprise and blush, silence fell, leaving only the sound of the microwave heating the pizza. "Who are you?" Naruto asked, breaking the silence with a look of genuine confusion. However, the white-haired girl didn't react at all to Naruto's question, and instead, a sleepy Rebecca and Dahlia left the room, equally naked. "Good morning," the two said in unison as they passed by the paralyzed white-haired woman with noticeable limps in her gait until they reached Naruto's side and also rinsed their faces. It only took them a moment to regain the sanity of their previous states and see Naruto, who was still looking at the white-haired woman, which caused Rebecca and Dahlia to look in that direction as well. "Lucy? What are you doing here?" They both asked at the same time. This seemed to bring the now known as Lucy out of her trance, so blinking a couple of times the white-haired girl spoke. "What happened?" Lucy wondered, trying to remember what had happened until she finally remembered. That's right, after having sneaked into a workshop where the tracker that had been placed on Dahlia by Main's orders to look for her indicated because they had been trying to communicate with her and failing in the attempt, she remembered walking through the dirty but certainly tidy workshop until she reached the living room, only to hear a door opening. So turning to look in that direction, Lucy remembered seeing a certain naked blonde, and as if it were instinctive, her eyes slid to that area, only to be petrified to see possibly the biggest cock she had ever seen. And despite being a virgin, Lucy had seen some members in some of their jobs that consisted of hacking some cameras and in some placed in rooms to see the target they had to kill having relations. After seeing such a monster and in her shocked state, Lucy didn't even notice when the blonde had taken her and given her a French kiss. This certainly turned off her lights until now that she had woken up and now saw the three naked people in front of her. "You kissed me," Lucy said suddenly with her blush still present, while Dahlia and Rebecca now turned to look at Naruto with different reactions, the first with curiosity and the second with mischief. "Oh? I didn't know you were going for the always serious Lucy, Rebecca said with mischievous amusement, while Dahlia shrugged and proceeded to look for the delicious smell of pizza. Haha, what can I say, I'm someone who is insatiable by nature, Naruto responded with equal amusement, making the green-haired girl laugh even more. I already noticed that, Rebecca said while rubbing her belly as if she had already eaten something, while Lucy simply watched the scene fully understanding the double meaning of the situation and couldn't help but imagine the kinds of things those three would do at night. Don't even mention it, I literally thought we were going to get pregnant if it weren't for us women taking that pill every month, said Dahlia as she sat on a couch and then ate a slice of pizza. It was actually true that women took birth control pills provided by the government for free to prevent overpopulation in the country. Although it wasn't mandatory to take them, the fact that the government gave them away for free at least encouraged women to take them without having to worry about spending money on them. Well? What are you doing here? Naruto asked calmly as he sat next to Dahlia, who leaned on the blonde's shoulder, and a smiling Rebecca sat on her lap. Oh right, Main is gathering us for a mission at 5 p.m. Lucy informed, drawing the attention of the three who turned to look at the white-haired girls seriously at the idea of a mission. Very well, let's go, Naruto was going to say, however, he stopped mid-sentence as he felt his member harden at the sensation of Rebecca's tight and fleshy buttocks constantly rubbing, so he quickly took a surprise Dahlia and Rebecca proceeded to re-enter the room while Lucy saw the cock in all its splendor. Before you go, give us a moment, Naruto said with a big smile to the white-haired girl who nodded stupidly, then closed the door behind him, leaving a silent white-haired girl who only said, "It's huge." Chapter 3. Oof, ready, let's go, said a now fully dressed Naruto as he got into his Lamborghini now restored from the damage it had received a few days ago. In the passenger seat was a still exhausted Dahlia, while carrying the equally tired Rebecca, while the news was heard in the background. However, the workshop was left in an awkward silence when Naruto turned his gaze to a certain white-haired woman who stood outside the car looking back at the blonde. Naruto stared at the white-haired girl who was doing nothing while on the news. He heard an announcement about an accident on the SkyTrain tracks. Lucy looked back at him with a flat face now with the reporter on the news, indicating that this accident was possibly going to momentarily paralyze the transportation routes for an indefinite amount of time, so with a raised eyebrow, Naruto proceeded to ask the question. So when are you going to get on? Naruto asked with clear confusion at the white-haired girl who simply crossed her arms. And where am I supposed to sit? Lucy asked back, to which Naruto's eyebrow rose higher. What do you mean, where? Here, where you don't see. Naruto replied, slapping his legs as if it were the most logical thing in the world. However, Lucy let out a groan of indignation at the suggestion, while keeping her face flat. Why don't you take Dahlia or Rebecca? Lucy asked, to which Naruto turned to see the sleeping girls who were curled up in the passenger seat. Well, they look very comfortable there, besides who would like me to wake them up just to change positions, Naruto replied to a Lucy who certainly noticed the two girls asleep, so knowing that she had no other choice, if what the news said was true, this was the only way to get to the meeting on time. So sitting on the blonde's crotch and lying down on the side of his chest, the white-haired girl could feel the blonde's package and then hear a moan from Naruto, who proceeded to take Lucy by the waist. With his right hand, Naruto proceeded to lift her up and then with his left hand proceed to accommodate his Naruto Jr. in a way that would not bother her when Lucy sat down. Once again letting Lucy sit down, she could feel it now more clearly in her ass. However, for her own sake, she simply tried to ignore the obviously large bulge in her slit. Closing the vehicle door, Naruto proceeded to start the car, and a few seconds later, for the first time, Naruto calmly left the workshop as an indication that he did not want to wake up the two girls in the passenger seat. 10 minutes later. Naruto and the girls calmly walked out onto the maritime highway, noticing that today it was particularly busier than usual, so what the news said was right regarding the means of transportation. The trip up to this point had remained in a bland silence, in which neither of the two parties made a comment to start a conversation. However, the artificial intelligence that all modern cars seem to have today spoke with a personalized female voice, a holographic figure of an anime girl with pink hair and small red horns protruding from her forehead. Note. For what you don't know, it's Saratowo. Mr. Naruto, you have a voice message, do you want me to play it? The artificial intelligence spoke, to which Naruto simply nodded his head with a yes behind it. Immediately the voice of a man was present in the car. Hello Naruto, I want you to do a job for me, the pay is $500,000, the voice was saying calmly. However, Naruto interrupted the voice note. Shut up, Naruto said in a calm tone, but still a hint of anger was noticeable in it, which silenced the voice note while the AI stared at Naruto. Do you want me to eliminate the AI tried to say, however Naruto quickly said his answer. Yes, deleted along with the contact, Naruto replied in the same tone of voice, while Lucy turned to look at Naruto, who kept his gaze calm. Now Lucy was not one of those people who like to get involved in other people's business, however, for the blonde she was sitting on right now to reject without hesitation a job offer with $500,000 at stake really intrigued her. "At your service, Mr. Naruto," the holographic figure responded, then disappeared, leaving the silence again, which now became really tense. "Lucy, right?" Naruto asked calmly to a white-haired girl who unconsciously tensed a little at Naruto's sudden voice in her left ear. "Yes." Lucy replied, remaining calm as she tried to relax and pay attention to what the blonde would say next. "Forget what you heard," Naruto said calmly to Lucy, who didn't respond and simply nodded while trying to find something to distract her mind, since Naruto's request didn't really sound like a request, but more like an order. To the white-haired girl's relief, her salvation came with the names of two sleepyheads, Dahlia and Rebecca, who began to wake up while rinsing their eyes. Naruto, you really are an animal," said a sleepy Dahlia who looked around to make sure where she was. This comment seemed to touch a nerve in the white-haired girl, who upon hearing what Dahlia said, caused Lucy's mind to automatically travel to the lump in her butt that she had worked so hard to ignore, so with a forced smile, she simply stood there trying again not to pay attention to it. "Oof, I think I can get addicted to this," Rebecca commented now with a really relaxed smile on her face, as if apparently all her problems had left her. Again Lucy could only feel her eye twitch in response to the comment. "Ahaha, come on girls, we have a guest here," said Naruto, not really caring that the two expressed their thoughts about the carnal acts they had this morning. The two, upon hearing what was said, turned to look at Lucy, as if they had really forgotten that she was there. "Oh? And how does it feel? Better than mine?" Rebecca asked Naruto mischievously, who understood what she meant, so with a mischievous smile, Naruto simply answered. "Well, not as good as yours, but I must admit it has a nice enveloping texture, just like Dahlia," Naruto replied with amusement, while Dahlia smiled, knowing that Naruto liked her butt. However, Lucy still didn't understand what they were talking about until she thought deeply about the matter and couldn't blush a little while crossing her arms and pouting. This was enough to make the trip more enjoyable. 28 minutes later. Entering one of the many port areas in the region, the Lamborghini moved between the occasional abandoned shipping containers in the area as rust slowly ate away at them. However, none of those present inside the car paid attention to the detail and simply continued on their way until they spotted a kind of warehouse with an equally abandoned appearance. Parking the vehicle in front of the warehouse, not a second later the engine turned off while the doors opened upwards, and quickly a blushing Lucy was the first to get out of the car, followed by a smiling Naruto, Dahlia and Rebecca, who had a self-sufficient face after managing to annoy the always impassive white-haired girl. Following Lucy into the warehouse, the small group walked through the now not so abandoned warehouse that had hallways now a little more decent enough to be a habitable place. However, Naruto stopped thinking about the place until they entered a particular room with red lights while a group of people sat on a sofa with a table in front. Naruto certainly identified those present as some of those who were at yesterday's party, as well as the fact that a certain brunette had told him the names of those present. To start with, apart from the robust man he spoke to yesterday and who Naruto knew was the leader of the group, there was also a blonde woman with fairly short hair and not as robust in appearance as Main, but still with quite a few muscles. The woman was wearing an open jacket with nothing underneath, causing the beginning of her breasts to peek out slightly. Naruto actually gave her a look. This woman's name was Dorio, and from what Dahlia said she was apparently Main's current partner. Followed by her was a man of rather thin physique and with rather long arms. The man had a shock of brown hair combed upwards, on his face he had a finely trimmed beard, and where his eyes should be there were some kind of inline lenses that lit up red. He was wearing an equally open leather jacket and tight leather pants. This man's name was Pilar. Otherwise, he didn't seem to have anything else to highlight other than his apparent sense of humor, if what he said to the other blonde in the group was anything to go by. "Look, but if he's just a brat, he's probably your type," was what the one recognized as Pilar said to a blonde with finely cropped hair and equally fine red eyes with yellow skeletons. Where her mouth and jaw should be there was a kind of red metal mask, through which a cigarette was stuck through a small hole. The woman's physique was thin, with curves not so exaggerated, but equally fine. For Naruto, the woman was quite fine in the sense of aesthetics. The woman also wore an equally red suit with a small bulletproof vest in the chest area. This woman was called Kiwi, and apart from her thin and fine appearance, Naruto thought she had a quite serious attitude, but also told sarcastic jokes from the answer she gave to Pilar. "He could certainly be my type after all. It's clear he has more brains than you," was what the well-known Kiwi said to a brown-haired man who wasn't really bothered by the insult to his IQ. To finish, Naruto turned his gaze to the last person in the group who remained the whole time with a smile that Naruto could compare to that of a cat. The last member was a girl with short black hair with a slightly fluffier appearance. Accompanying her feline smile, the girl had two small thin rectangular slits on each cheek. The physique was thin and much more curvy than Kiwi, who still had not lost her touch. The girl wore a leather suit tight to her body, accompanied by a small pink jacket with white touches, and unlike the other people, Naruto did not recognize her because he did not see her at the party yesterday and because Dahlia had not told him her name either. Looking sideways at the girl with whom he had spent a hot night in search of an answer, she simply shook her head, implying that she didn't know her either, so leaving that aside, Naruto simply chose to sit in the chair in front of the group, while the only thing that divided them was a small table. The other girls simply went to some other position in the room to sit or simply leaned against the wall. Silence fell and the room had inevitably become so quiet that Naruto was already feeling anxious just because the group was taking so long to say a single word, so deciding to break the silence on his own, Naruto proceeded to say his first words. "Hello, my name is Naru." Naruto was going to introduce himself calmly if it wasn't until he had to tilt his head back to avoid the gigantic hand of a serious man who was trying to slap him, returning his head to where it was before. Naruto chose to simply look back at the strong man with a raised eyebrow that said in all its splendor, "Are you serious?" Silence fell in the room again, and now the one who broke the silence was the strong man who a moment ago wanted to slap him. "No one cares about your name until you can integrate into the team, so just limit yourself to talking when Main was talking," until Naruto decided it was the best time to interrupt him. "Before you continue, I wanted to say that well, I'm not someone who usually works in a team, but since that idiot Faraday is the one who has the money, I have to follow his orders until he runs out of money or something unfortunate happens to him. I just wanted to say that," Naruto commented while Main looked at him with a certain degree of annoyance at being interrupted. Naruto, on the other hand, noticed the irritation of the brunette, so raising his hands in playful surrender, Naruto said, "I was just saying there's no need for you to look at me with those eyes, Buck." What an attitude, Naruto said to himself, not really intimidated by Main's annoying look and the certainly funny expression of Dahlia, Rebecca and an equally funny Kiwi and the unknown black-haired girl who were trying to be more discreet but failing miserably in the attempt, letting out a sigh of exasperation. Main simply chose to continue with what they came to do. "So whatever, you have a mission to eliminate and recover a hostage captured by a gang," the brunette began while everyone watched as Naruto raised his hand as if he were in a classroom. This certainly brought out a small vein in Main for being interrupted again, however he gave him the floor with a nod. "From what you said, it seems I'm going to do the mission alone, right?" Naruto asked, to which Main quickly responded with a nod. "So the payment will be all for me?" Naruto asked again, to which Main proceeded to answer. "You will be given your fair share of the work, but we will keep a portion of the money for getting the job. Besides, this mission is more to see if it really suits us to have you on the team," Main responded to Naruto, who simply nodded. "And what band are we talking about?" Naruto asked curiously. "The Black and Bronx," Main replied, to which Naruto simply nodded indifferently under the attentive gaze of the others, since in itself this gang, although it was not a big problem for his group, they doubted that someone like Naruto, who did not seem to have any cybernetic prosthesis, could deal with them. However, leaving the matter, they all stood up to head in the direction of the lair of said gang to complete the mission. So leaving the room, they all went to a black and yellow truck that was inside the warehouse garage. For a moment Naruto saw the car that obviously had some more improvements in the area that would be the armor. In the engine part, Naruto could tell that they had changed it to a methane engine, a quite powerful engine, judging by the slight tremor it made when it was turned on, although of course, it was not as powerful as the engines that Naruto modified personally. However, Naruto had to stop thinking about the matter when he noticed the incoming call in his sight. Honestly, for Naruto, this was the first time that he was grateful that someone called him at this moment, for the simple fact that the trip itself was being silent and uncomfortable as hell, and although he was usually alone most of the time, it was not uncomfortable because of the fact that it was his own solitude without anyone around. On the other hand, in this situation everyone was silent and gave him slight glances with caution that he would do something. Although of course Dahlia and Rebecca did not care about that, so ignoring the occasional glances of the group, Naruto simply answered the call. "What do you want, Dr. Leech?" Naruto answered calmly as he took out a pack of cigarettes at the same time as a certain thin blonde who sat next to him. Almost synchronously the two tried to take out a cigarette, however, unlike Naruto's pack of cigarettes, Kiwi's did not let go of one, implying that it was empty. This in itself was noticed by Naruto, who had already put the cigarette in his mouth. "Hello, Mr. Naruto, the reason for my call is to inform you that Mrs. Martinez just woke up," informed the doctor's voice, while Naruto lit the cigarette before the attentive longing look of Kiwi, who tried to hide. Now Naruto had a drop of sweat, however Naruto simply took a drag on the cigarette and then took it between his fingers and then extended it to the thin blonde, who did not hesitate to take it and also take a drag, while everyone saw the interaction of the two blondes. That's good news. So how are you feeling mentally? Naruto asked as he went to take out another cigarette until Kiwi's delicate hand extended the cigarette back to Naruto, who took it back to take another puff to see that Kiwi extended his hand again, indicating that he should give her the cigarette back. Well, mentally I would say that Mrs. Martinez is in a state of temporary shock. For the moment the only thing she has been asking is the location of her daughter, replied the doctor, to which Naruto nodded mentally. In itself it would be normal for that to happen, but while taking a last puff of the cigarette Naruto returned the cigarette to Kiwi, who also took the last puff. Okay, tell Gloria that her daughter is fine and that in a few hours we will go get her, Naruto replied as he felt the truck he was in slow down until it came to a complete stop. Then everyone started to get out of the car, implying that they had arrived at the location. Getting out of the truck, the only thing he could see was a 3-story building. If Naruto had to guess, he would say that they were in the most dangerous area of the region, judging by the shooting that could be heard a few blocks from where they were and the homeless people taking drugs on a corner. However, stopping to think about that, Naruto simply turned in the direction of the group and then spoke. Okay, who can lend me a gun? Naruto asked calmly to the group who were just watching him. Rebecca and Dahlia were actually about to give our blonde protagonist a gun until Main decided to speak. Brat, if you didn't bring anything to defend yourself with, it's not our problem, you just figure it out, Main replied to Naruto, who stared back at him for a few seconds until he simply dropped his hand and shrugged, then pulled a knife out of his pocket. It doesn't really matter, all I need is this, was Naruto's response as he walked calmly to the doors of the building and entered as if it were his home. The group simply waited to hear any hint of a battle, however nothing was heard for about 45 seconds, so seeing a curious black-haired girl among them, she proceeded to speak. Do you think he's scared? The black-haired woman asked curiously as she placed a finger on her chin and a seemingly innocent look adorned her face. However, before anyone could respond, disaster broke out in the building as from one moment to the next multiple shots began to be heard while the interior of the building could be seen lighting up by the gunfire. Distractedly, everyone watched as the ground floor windows were stained with blood while some broke and pieces of flesh flew out. This really surprised those present as they wondered what the hell was going on inside. Moments before, Naruto had quietly entered the building and without worrying so much he continued walking down the rather dirty and somewhat short hallway, since right in front of him there was a detour to the right through which he would possibly find another hallway. Distractedly Naruto noticed the familiar sound of someone's footsteps approaching. However, and without even flinching at his possible discovery, Naruto continued walking until he reached the detour, only to meet a guy with the standard appearance of a punk thug, and yet the man could not make any reaction other than the stifled "huh" that came out of his lips while now he had a small knife embedded in his eye up to half the hilt, without any mobility anymore in his body. This indicated that the knife had been able to reach the brain without any problem, and before the body fell, Naruto held him so that he could calmly lay him on the floor so as not to make noise, although well that would not matter after all, the sound of the music at high volumes would not let them hear. I forgot to ask him if he wanted a quiet or rough job, Naruto said to himself as he was thinking about the matter of being discovered. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto simply took the 2 pistols tied clumsily to the corpse's waist and then slightly slid the magazine of both weapons to make sure how many bullets it had. Putting the magazine back in with the knowledge of having 12 bullets in each pistol, Naruto proceeded to see if the corpse had any spare magazines, only to be disappointed to find none. Letting out a sigh, Naruto looked up to notice that what was at the detour was indeed another hallway longer than the previous one that if Naruto had to guess would be about 15 meters long. At the end you could see a space with a dark and dirty looking glass where 3 people could fit. Next to it there were 2 doors also made of glass, so nodding mentally Naruto stood calmly while kicking the corpse to one side so it wouldn't get in the way. Well, I guess it will be abrupt, Naruto said to himself and then leaned on his 2 hands while holding the guns in a running pose as he closed his eyes, letting out a rather long and calm exhalation. Naruto opened his eyes again while his vision quickly became tunnel vision and he felt how everything around him was slowing down. For the opinion of any person they would simply say that this state was some kind of 5-star grade prosthesis, almost military grade so to speak, and while the prosthesis could exist to the possible disappointment of those who supported that opinion, it was not the work of a prosthesis, but rather it was the work of Naruto's own body that forced the nerve endings in his brain to accelerate, causing a higher level of processing in his brain, to such a level that everything seemed to be done. Normally this state could be achieved when you do some really exhaustive sport or when you are in a situation where mental stress is the first thing that attacks your brain, and this is what everyone calls adrenaline in your veins. Without really expecting another second to pass, our blonde protagonist stepped hard with his left foot, causing his muscles to expand due to the sudden traction in the muscles. For Naruto, the race towards the mirror took at least 7 seconds, however the reality was different since those 7 seconds were shortened to 3 seconds, in which the blonde was already in front of the glass while jumping through it, obviously breaking it in the process. This incredible ability in his body was actually possible, since due to his only prosthesis in his body, which were the chrome lungs, Naruto could take his body to its limits without really getting tired thanks to the heart rate that it provided him. That is why every movement that Asia made his body was 100% of his physical capacity. Once the glass was broken and the first piece of glass was removed from his sight, which only took about 76 microseconds, Naruto quickly studied and calculated the parameters of the room, along with possible objects that he could use in the future, for when he ran out of ammunition. By the time he had completed half of these calculations, Naruto had already fired 4 shots that embedded themselves in the heads of 4 guys who had barely heard the sound of the glass breaking. Without stopping in his race, Naruto quickly changed the position of his hands to aim at 2 other guys who were turning around with shock written on their faces. However, these were his last reactions when the 2 shots Naruto fired were embedded in the heads of the 2. Landing on the dirty tile floor, Naruto slid while shooting at 4 other guys who were about to take their weapons, so they could only let out muffled screams that came out of their mouths for the last time. Standing up quickly, Naruto noticed that behind the right side, something far from him was already starting to aim at him, so passing his left hand under his armpit, Naruto fired 5 shots that hit the guy who fell on his back, while he was beaten up a little by the impact of the 5 bullets. Turning his gaze back to the front, Naruto proceeded to kick one of the several tables full of basic bottles in the large room, only for it to be intercepted by around 15 shots from 2 guys who were aiming at him. Having knowledge of their locations, Naruto came out from behind the table that was still in the air, so that with great precision, he could embed the last 2 bullets from the pistol in his left hand into the heads of the guys who were next to a window, causing it to be stained with blood in the process. Looking in front of him, Naruto now noticed how one of the members of the gang right in front of him was in the process of pointing a submachine gun in his direction. However, before he could manage to point it at him, Naruto dropped the gun in his left hand and then took the submachine gun by the same, thus preventing him from pointing it at him, and with great fluidity, Naruto already had the gun in his right hand, pointed at the head of the guy who knew nothing else, when his brains flew all over the place. Not staying there, Naruto proceeded to empty the gun's magazine into 3 guys to his right, who also fell dead from shots to their head or hearts. Releasing the gun, Naruto adjusted the submachine gun in his hands so that without really aiming, he began to shoot the last 5 people scattered in front of him, causing them to be unable to do anything against the rain of bullets that fell upon them. Stopping in his run, Naruto finally stopped as he dropped to his knees on the floor, and with the side of the submachine gun pointed at the stairs that led to the 2nd floor, Naruto stood there for about 2 seconds until finally nothing else happened, so stopping aiming, Naruto looked around, giving a look of satisfaction at everything he had done. Stopping again as a solitary drop of sweat fell down his forehead, Naruto simply began to walk to the stairs, only for before reaching the stairs he hit on one side of the wall next to them, and shortly after a guy quickly came down with a gun in his hand. However, the only thing he saw was a large number of his dead companions, before his vision darkened thanks to the last 10 submachine gun shots that burst the man's head. "CHMP they don't learn," was the only thing Naruto said to himself as he proceeded to take the gun from the corpse, along with a revolver that another corpse had, so going up the stairs he stopped 1 step before and a second later, when he saw the first signs of someone leaning out from the wall next to the stairs, with the intention of shooting him, Naruto proceeded to jump forward, effectively passing by the guy who ended up pointing at the empty stairs while Naruto was behind him. Trying to quickly adjust his gun to kill the blonde, his trajectory was interrupted when Naruto placed his hand on the elbow of the guy who could not continue turning in his direction, while now he saw the blonde's gun pointing at his head at point-blank range. Without letting the body fall to the ground, Naruto grabbed it by the neck and then covered himself, thus avoiding a wave of shots from killing him. Without wasting time, Naruto stuck the gun out of the shoulder of the corpse and quickly proceeded to shoot the 3 people who shot him who fell dead. So dropping the corpse, Naruto resumed his race down the hallway on the 2nd floor, while suddenly another man came out of a room to Naruto's left. However, Naruto didn't even flinch at the new obstacle that was the naked man in front of whom he had possibly been fornicating with some whore in that room. The man actually turned his gaze only to see the hole of the revolver aim in his eye, so without thinking more, Naruto released the first shot of the revolver, while without any resistance, he proceeded to push the barrel of the gun into the hole, freshly made in the dead man's cranium, and proceeded to carry it as a shield, while more vandals appeared by the stairs that went to the 3rd floor. And while the vandals shot at the naked corpse of the man, Naruto simply shot between the skull of the corpse until only one vandal remained who was scared by the unfavorable situation they were suffering, so with the fear written on his face, the vandal proceeded to jump out the window. Naruto on the other hand saw the scene that was forming in front of him, and while he could let the guy leave, the judge who was watching everything, who was an apparently strict main, would surely reproach him for having let one escape. Distractedly noticing how last bandit appeared with a sawed-off shotgun with possibly expanding bullets, Naruto without real effort nailed the last shot of the revolver in his head while dropping his meat shield, quickly grabbed the shotgun while he saw how the bandit who was trying to escape already had half of his body out, so taking an electrical cable lying on the floor, our blonde protagonist looked out the window while passing the cable above the guy who stopped in his escape. So turning his gaze, he could only see the shotgun pointing at his chest. "Sweet dreams," said Naruto with a crazy smile on his face, and without really thinking he pulled the trigger, causing the man's body to be torn apart everywhere before the attentive gaze of the small group who watched the scene in amazement. "Uff, that was close, I almost got away," Naruto said to himself with a small trace of sweat on his forehead as he felt himself reach a state of inspiration, a state in which his creativity and mind flew with killer ways of doing things that any person would not believe possible to do because of how complex they were. So what better way to commemorate this state than to get more inspired while listening to good music? So without wasting time, Naruto turned around while looking for that music that would give him that auditory boost in a holographic list that appeared in his sight. Finding the music, Naruto proceeded to play it, and with a smile he looked over his shoulder at the group that the whole time kept looking at him to give a two-finger salute. Starting to run up the stairs, Naruto reached another large room while dodging the blade of a vandal who had swung his arm, from which a bullet protruded. Naruto on the other hand had slipped on his knees while aiming the shotgun right at the shoulder of the vandal, who screamed in agony while the arm with the blade separated from the body to be caught by a Naruto who used it to decapitate another guy and who tried to hit him with a metal bat. Without letting his head touch the ground, Naruto did a 360 turn, giving him in the process a kick to the head that collided with the head of another guy who was pointing an assault rifle at him. So jumping in the air, Naruto spun on his axis while dodging another vandal, and in the process, he threw the arm with the blade in the direction of the vandal with the rifle, who could not even let out a moan of pain at the blade deeply embedded in his forehead. Performing a kick to the head of the vandal he had dodged a few moments ago, Naruto slammed the guy's head into the ground, causing a small crack from the possible chrome skull that crashed into it. Without wasting time, Naruto landed on the back of the man's head with such force that it broke his neck. However, Naruto could not stay in place any longer when he jumped out of the path of another vandal's sights who shot a second blade in his direction. Taking the assault rifle, Naruto stood next to a fairly rusty stove, so taking the dented gas tank, Naruto made another 360 turn, giving it a more powerful impulse and throwing it in the direction of the guy who had shot him, who was in front of a window. The force with which the tank was going made the man fly out the window as he watched Naruto already aiming in his direction with his ever-present smile. Explosion, the tank detonated, sending flying the 5 remaining vandals that appeared from a room next to the window. Quickly getting up, the 5 guys stood in a row, causing Naruto to smile even more when his creativity exploded in his head while more ways to kill them at the same time crossed his mind, each one more incredible than the last. So running in the direction of the stunned vandals, Naruto took while taking a fairly long iron pipe from the ground and standing next to the 5 guys, Naruto pointed the rifle at the skull of the first vandal, who did not flinch at his inevitable death until he no longer knew more when the holes made their way through his head while continuing with the second and the third until reaching the last. Finally, Naruto embedded it through the holes in the head of each dead vandal until it was firmly nailed to the wall, letting the corpses hang like clothes hanging out to dry. For a moment Naruto stood still as he listened to the last seconds of the music until it finally ended, leaving a silence in the building that was only slightly attenuated by the drops of blood hitting the dirty cold. "Sigh, that was intense," Naruto said to himself as he wiped his forehead with the sleeve of his clothes that was stained with blood in some places. "Well, I guess I'll go find the hostage," Naruto commented as he turned around and looked around until he saw some double doors that screamed leader's room. Ignorant of how stupidly obvious the sight was, Naruto simply approached the doors with a kick while aiming with his rifle, only to not be surprised when he found the leader of the now non-existent gang, pointing a gun at the head of the hostage he was supposed to rescue. "Don't move or I'll blow." The man's warning was cut short when a bullet blew out his brains, causing him to drop the hostage, whom Naruto knew was a student from Arasaka Academy, if the dirty uniform was anything to go by. Ignoring how stupid and anticlimactic this last confrontation was, Naruto simply let out an exasperated sigh. "Sigh, honestly, how come they never do this in the movies?" Naruto said to himself with annoyance at how easy it was to kill the idiot who thought he had the advantage before dying. "I guess you're the hostage I have to rescue," Naruto said to the ordinary-looking student who only gave a shaky nod, so approaching the girl of about 16 years old, Naruto lifted her like a sack of potatoes to proceed to leave the place. 9 minutes later. The silent group that hadn't moved from their place in the 20 minutes that gunfire had been heard saw how a smiling Naruto peeked through the main door of the building, as if a few minutes before he hadn't exterminated a gang of vandals while he carried the hostage, who didn't say a single word because of how scared she was. The group just watched as Naruto approached them until he was in front of them and took down the still trembling schoolgirl and then extended his hands in an exaggerated way of expression of presenting something while he said, "Darren. Here is the hostage safe and sound." Naruto presented cheerfully, only to receive an awkward silence while behind them on the other side of the street, a prostitute shoots a homeless man who tried to run away after offering her services. The scene went on for a few more seconds until Naruto finally left his presentation pose to then hide his face in Dahlia's chest while pretending to sob, and the brown-haired girl only managed to caress the blonde's hair comfortingly while Rebecca patted him on the back. "Nobody appreciates my efforts," said a depressed Naruto, making those present sweat drop while Rebecca simply hugged the blonde's head between her modest breasts. Yeah, you were amazing," encouraged the green-haired loli, causing Naruto to stay a few seconds longer until he finally detached himself from Rebecca as if his depressed state had never existed to begin with. "Buck, I would kiss them right now if we weren't at work," Naruto said with a mischievous smile, only for the strong man from Maine to clear his throat loudly. "Well, we have the girl, let's meet with the client and finish this, but first, how many implants do you have?" Maine asked the blonde, drawing the attention of everyone present who were now looking closely at Naruto, who simply raised a finger. "I only have one," Naruto replied calmly, leaving an awkward silence in the area until an annoyed Pilar made everyone's thoughts known. "You have to be kidding me, you damn brat." Pilar shouted while Naruto covered his ears, avoiding ear pain from how high-pitched the man's scream was. "Brad, I warned you about what would happen if you lied to me," Maine reminded him with a threatening voice to Naruto, who didn't flinch and simply stared back at the strongman for a few seconds until Maine finally gave in with a sigh. "Anyway, let's get the job done," Maine said, turning around towards the truck to be followed by the other groups, except for the jet black-haired girl who waited for him for a few seconds until Rebecca decided to introduce the girl to the newest members. "Naruto, Dahlia, this is Sasha, and she's one of the 3 netrunners on the team," Rebecca introduced with her always funny smile, while the now recognized as Sasha extended her hand to Naruto, who shook it while he saw the girl's feline smile that seemed curiously cunning to him, so returning her smile with a cunning touch, the two simply looked at each other for a few seconds until the black-haired girl spoke. "You and I will get along very well," Sasha said playfully to Naruto, who simply kept his smile to give a nod. "I hope so, I'm Naruto, although I suppose you already knew that, and this cutie here by my side is Dahlia." Naruto introduced a brown-haired girl while he wrapped his arm around the shoulders of the girl, who really didn't mind the contact after all they had done more intimate things. "The pleasure too," Sasha responded with equal enthusiasm while behind them, Maine's voice was heard demanding them to hurry up. 43 minutes later. Things had gone smoothly after the extermination of the gang until they took the hostage to the client, who quickly made the deposit of the money, which consisted of $120,000, of which $90,000 went to Naruto for having done most of the work, if not all. After that, a few more words were said until finally everyone went their separate ways, which leads to a certain yellow Lamborghini that was parked in front of a certain clinic where a certain Redeed was hospitalized. "I still can't believe you didn't tell me my mom had already woken up," said a tenderly annoyed Dahlia, who was trying to make her annoyance known. However, the fact that she was sitting on Naruto's lap diminished the effect she wanted to give, and she simply seemed tender rather than annoyed. Yeah, I just forgot, besides look, we're here," Naruto said with a smile, trying to calm the annoyance while he took her chin and gave her a kiss that the brown-haired girl tried to resist at first until she finally gave in and returned the kiss with passion while wrapping her arms around his neck. "Hey, don't force me to join," said a smiling Rebecca, who had seen the whole interaction with an amused smile. The two finally broke the kiss. "If you want, you can join us when we get to the room," Naruto replied, to which Rebecca's smile increased and she gave a flirtatious nod, leaving the topic for later. The group of 3 got out of the car and then entered the clinic where Dr. Leech was already waiting for them. "Hello Dr. Leech, where is Gloria?" Naruto asked the doctor, who could only resist the impulse to demand the blonde to stop calling him that. However, leaving that for later, he simply guided the group to the room where there was a Redeed who turned to look at those present with intrigue until she laid her eyes on her daughter, causing tears to come out of her eyes. "Dahlia, are you okay?" Gloria said to Dahlia, who approached the Redeed and then gave her a mother-daughter hug. "Am I over the shock?" Naruto asked the doctor, who nodded calmly while flipping through some papers. "Very well, in that case I'll take her home," Naruto responded calmly, since every day the woman was in this clinic they charged her for her stay. Receiving a reluctant nod from the doctor, he proceeded to speak. Before you take her, it is necessary for you to know that Mrs. Martinez is not in condition to walk yet, therefore she needs to use crutches for at least 5 days or a week, as well as medicines for the phantom ailments that she will have for the next 2 weeks, said the doctor, drawing the attention of the redeed who could simply think about how expensive all of that would be. However, before Gloria asked for the price, our blonde protagonist got there first. How much does all that cost? Naruto asked calmly as the doctor calculated on a holographic screen until it showed a total of $5,000, a price that seemed quite high to the redeed who was a bit to protest. If it wasn't until Naruto nodded his head as who wanted to get out of there and not see that idiot doctor anymore. Very well, add medicine for 1 more week and that's it, said Naruto, so that the price went up to 7,000, which Naruto proceeded to pay quickly as he approached the redeed who looked at him in confusion because he had paid for her medicine. However, she couldn't think anymore when she felt how she was lifted from the bed in a bridal style. So shocked by the sudden movement, the redeed could only cling to the neck of the blonde who began to leave while the doctor gave her some crutches along with some bags of medicine to Rebecca, who took them to follow the group out of the clinic. 8 minutes later. The group of 4 was riding quietly in the car while Naruto carried the quiet redeed on his legs and Dahlia carried Rebecca on hers. None of those present said a single word, either because they didn't want to talk or because they had nothing to say. However, the silence was finally broken by Gloria, who spoke. How much are you asking? Gloria asked Naruto, who really didn't flinch at her question. After all, he expected it. Not satisfied with the blonde silence, Gloria spoke again. The doctor told me that you paid for the platinum plan of $60,000, that added to the $7,000 and the interest, Gloria said, swallowing hard at the amount of money she had to pay. I would have to pay you, Gloria was going to say until Naruto interrupted her. Nothing, you don't have to pay me anything, Naruto replied calmly as he turned off the path to enter behind his workshop. But you paid for all that, Gloria replied to Naruto, who turned off the car and let out a sigh. Sigh, calm down and take a break, you know this is the first time I've seen you without dark circles under your eyes, and Dahlia told me that you work yourself to the bone, so give yourself a break, said Naruto, while placing his hand on the redeed's head to remain silent for a moment. I can't, I need to pay for the apartment again, Gloria replied, to which Naruto shook his head since the owner of the apartment had done the two for not paying the rent. You don't need to pay for it, you can stay here, Naruto replied as he got out of the car next to Gloria in their bridal style. I have to pay for the car repairs, Gloria replied again, only for Naruto to approach a large bundle that was being covered by some sheets and then remove the sheet, revealing a car that Gloria didn't recognize for a moment due to the different color and some aesthetic details. That was until she finally saw the car brand. Don't worry, I've already solved it, Naruto replied with a big smile upon seeing the modified car in front of him. Ages, but I have to, the redeed tried to reply once more only for Naruto to place a finger on her lips, silencing her. Calm down, take a vacation from work, although if it were up to me, you could take a permanent vacation, said Naruto, to which Gloria could only remain silent for a few seconds until finally her eyes overflowed with tears since no one had ever offered her the opportunity to rest, not even her boss who saw her every day breaking her back at work while being treated like less than shit by all her superiors. No one had ever extended a hand to her in this rotten world. A small light finally illuminated and gave color to her dull life. It's okay was all Gloria said while she continued to cry her eyes out. Chapter 4. 12:20 a.m. It was 12:20 in the morning when a completely naked blonde boy had to open his sleepy eyes upon hearing some noises in the kitchen, although in this situation, Naruto would be cautious in the face of a possible murderer or thief in this case. Our blonde protagonist didn't even make the effort to look for a weapon, after all the noises were too careless to be someone who came to steal, and that only meant one thing. So gently removing a sleeping Dahlia from his enzyme, Naruto was about to get up until he felt the other lump, which was an equally naked Rebecca who was sleeping on his right side while hugging him by the waist, so removing her in an equally delicate way, Naruto was finally able to get out of bed and then look for his pants in the dark room. 30 seconds later Naruto had already put on his pants and a shirt and then left the room, going directly into the kitchen and dining room. However, Naruto simply raised an eyebrow when he noticed that there was no one in the kitchen. Looking more around him, Naruto inspected the place for a moment until the familiar smell of popcorn reached his nose, along with the almost inaudible sound of the television, accompanied by the light that slightly illuminated the pieces in the workshop. Being from the dining room, Naruto turned his gaze to where the holographic television should be only to see a redeed sitting on the couch while eating popcorn and trying to find a movie she liked. Approaching the couch calmly, Naruto stood right behind an apparently calm Gloria, who was wearing a simple large nightgown that covered a little below her buttocks. Under the nightgown she wore some lycra shorts. The redeed seemed not to notice the presence of the blonde, if it wasn't until Naruto calmly circled the couch, calling Gloria's attention, that she stopped looking for a movie and simply stared at the blonde who sat next to her on the couch. For a moment the dark workshop dimly lit by the holographic television that was watched by Naruto, who looked at the billboards of the different movies that were available to watch. Honestly, Naruto had to hold back a groan of disappointment when he watched the movies. After all, each and every one of the movies that were out today were remasters of old movies. Avatar, a movie that came out in 2009, had been remastered about 2 years ago. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Harry Potter, Matrix, Fast and Furious, Mad Max, Avengers, all of those titles had been remastered to all the complete sagas with the same plot, only with different actors and set in the present. The day's movies lacked originality, repeating the same plot over and over again for children who see the movies for the first time. However, stopping to think about the matter, Naruto turned his gaze to the Red, who stared at him in those few seconds in which the silence enveloped them like a warm blanket and they simply stayed there enjoying each other's company. "You look calmer than before," Naruto commented after 5 minutes of silence to Gloria, who was still looking for a movie, only for her gaze to lower a little. Naruto simply looked at her out of the corner of his eye for a few moments while he saw how Gloria put her feet up on the sofa and hid her face in her knees, so not staying there, Naruto spoke again. "But that's good," were Naruto's only words. After all, the Red had been able to get out of a small depression, so to speak, after several days upon learning of Dahlia's expulsion from the Arasaka Academy. To be honest, Naruto could safely say that he admired Gloria's willpower. After all, not just anyone would break their back day and night to be able to pay for their daughter's studies in such a prestigious school. However, there was no reason to blame Dahlia for the expulsion issue. Things happen, and many times there was nothing you can do to reverse them. Coming out of his thoughts, Naruto heard Gloria speak as she peeked her head out from between her knees. "I guess I try not to think about it," Gloria replied as the lighting from the television illuminated her face, which turned in Naruto's direction, her features slowly turning into ones of curiosity. "Why are you doing this for us?" Gloria asked curiously to Naruto, who stared at her for a few moments until he finally looked away from the television and spoke. "I saw you," Naruto began, drawing Gloria's attention, who was surprised by Naruto's response. "Every person I've seen around here is nothing more than someone who is content with the misery they earn on a daily basis, only to spend it on drugs, prostitutes, or some other very expensive prosthesis," Naruto continued calmly as he went down the list of movies. A certainly disappointing view of the world, people scraping for pennies, only to waste them. However, among all this garbage dump and excrement, there was a light that always came on late at night or early in the morning. In a 2030 Thornton Galena G240, Naruto spoke, making Gloria's eyes widen slightly at what Naruto said. That light was a red-headed woman who only worked exhausting hours just to make her daughter someone in life, and although adversities stood in her way and she got into shady things, that light never went out. Naruto continued to turn his gaze to the red-head, who looked at the blonde with silent surprise. "Then when I saw that light going out in the darkness of that night, I wanted to prevent you from going extinct," Naruto finished saying, looking into Gloria's teary eyes, who could only feel her eyes tingling at Naruto's words. So slowly and unconsciously the red-head approached the blonde to then settle into a warm hug, while once again tears flowed in cascades from Gloria's eyes, who sobbed silently, while a calm Naruto caressed the woman's hair as if she were a child. Yeah, everything's going to be okay," was what Naruto said as he chose the random search option on the holographic television that proceeded to search for a movie until the screen immediately went black, indicating that the movie was about to start. However, before the movie started, the two present heard the sleepy voice of a certain brunette, causing the two to separate from their light hug to see Dahlia walking towards them. "Can't you sleep?" Dahlia asked while rinsing her eyes, followed by an equally sleepy Rebecca, who had only bothered to put on a tight t-shirt along with her panties, unlike Dahlia, who had put on a sweater along with some thigh-high pants. The presence of the two girls made Gloria quickly dry her tears and force herself to regain her composure. "What are you doing at this hour?" Rebecca asked as she settled between Naruto's legs. Naruto didn't object to the green-haired girl's action and simply wrapped her arms around Rebecca's waist, which landed on Naruto's chest. On the other hand, Dahlia settled on Naruto's left side, while Naruto stopped wrapping his left arm around Rebecca's waist to now wrap his arm around Dahlia's shoulders, who let herself get close to the blonde. Gloria for her part only saw the interaction of the three on one side of her. If Gloria had to be honest, she didn't really know how to react to the actions of her daughter and the other girl who she knew she had seen a few times in the main group. Deep down she knew that this could easily be something immoral, so to speak, that three people were sharing a man. However, immoral things had been an undervalued term a long time ago, and it was really no longer known what things could be morally or immorally correct. After all, the world had become such a corrupt place, it was inevitable that this would happen. Stopping to think about the matter, Gloria looked up, only to see how Naruto now extended his right hand as a sign of invitation for her to join them. At this moment the Red didn't really know what to do. Was she capable of joining this possible relationship with her daughter, or would she simply look the other way and ignore the invitation that was offered to her? How would her daughter react to knowing that she would be starting a possible relationship with her boyfriend? She wondered while absent-mindedly giving a slight glance to her daughter, who returned the look with a smile that said in all its splendor, "Does it really matter?" That visualization of the scene made her mind enter a small period of enlightening trance while she thought about everything that was on her mind. Does it really matter? Gloria wondered to herself, with everything that had happened, did it really matter? She lost her job, her daughter was expelled from the academy in which she invested large amounts of money, she almost died in an accident, she was hospitalized for several days, and yet she still worried that a group relationship with her daughter's boyfriend and another girl was something immoral, so once again that question resonated in her head. Does it really matter? She asked again. Well, this time Gloria lowered her gaze and a small smile graced her face. Jump, of course it doesn't matter a bucking shit, I don't care anymore was the answer Gloria gave herself as she leaned towards Naruto and let the warmth of said boy's body surround her once again and cover her like a blanket, so there they stayed once more hugging while they enjoyed the remastered version of Pirates of the Caribbean. The days passed with relative tranquility, or well, that would be for a normal person who lived in a neighborhood without crimes and without shootings on a daily basis. On the other hand, for a certain blonde, these quiet days consisted of doing some work with his now new work group, earning a salary, going to his workshop, working for a while on his cars and well, bucking with one of the now 3 inhabitants in his house. Today Naruto didn't think it would be any different from the previous days, or well, that's what he thought. Today, like every previous day, Naruto found himself returning to the abandoned warehouse with his coworkers after having finished a mission that really didn't offer any difficulty. Seriously, how are you so skilled without having any prosthetics? Was the question a smiling Sasha asked Naruto, who smiled back. Who knows, maybe it's a gift I have, was Naruto's vague response that didn't really bother those present, either because they weren't interested in the answer or because they simply didn't want to investigate the matter. Naruto had actually integrated quite well into the group. For everyone, Naruto was like that typical person with whom they could get along, no matter if each of their personalities were totally different. The blonde always seemed to adapt incredibly quickly and efficiently. It was almost like when they were on missions. Naruto adapted so efficiently to the situation they found themselves in that he seemed to be able to make decisions almost immediately, and yet, not everyone seemed to be bothered by that fact. But Sasha and Naruto had a relationship of constant jokes and playful flirting, almost as if one of the two wanted to force the other to give up the position of best joker, almost totally different from the relationship he had with the blonde Kiwi. With her, Naruto had a relationship equally of jokes. However, unlike Sasha, the jokes with her were more concentrated on sarcastic comments from the other members of the group that really made the blonde feel comfortable with Naruto, while sharing cigarettes from time to time had already become a habit, and without even asking, there were times when Kiwi unconsciously offered him his cigarette. The relationship with Pilar was actually quite simple and bearable, according to Naruto. After all, the only thing you had to have to get along with a lanky guy was to share a taste for the opposite sex and make jokes related to the subject, and you wouldn't have any problems with him. Doria was, so to speak, like an older sister to everyone in the group, and it really wasn't a real problem getting along with her compared to Main, who honestly seemed to have some problem with him at the beginning when he started working with them. However, after a while, they ended up having a relationship of mutual respect between the two, and that was it. There really wasn't a better way to say it. And well, to finish, there was the relationship with Dahlia and Rebecca. Well, this relationship was not really necessary to describe, after all the three were in a kind of shared relationship in which neither of them seemed to care about the fact of sharing them. After all, normal things were overrated nowadays. Leaving the matter behind them, the group stopped walking for a moment, only to look in the direction of the sound of something liquid hitting some metal, so turning their gaze, the first thing the group saw was a homeless man urinating from the top of a container into an aluminum tank. For a moment the group stared at the guy until they finally decided to ignore him and simply continue on their way to their hideout and share the day's pay. However, this didn't seem to please a certain lanky guy who, instead of leaving with the group, decided to climb onto the container and start yelling at the homeless man. "But bucking disgusting. Get out of here before I kill you," were Pilar's warnings to the homeless man, who didn't seem to be fazed at all by Pilar's threats. This fact made Naruto raise an eyebrow at the strangeness of the scene, and while it wasn't strange that the homeless man didn't react to Pilar's screams, the strange thing was that the homeless man had enough prosthetics on his body to really be a poor person. If Naruto's eyesight didn't fail him, the prosthetics that guy was wearing hadn't even been on the market for 4 months, and if Naruto had to calculate the total price, that guy would have had to spend maybe $865,000 just on the prosthetics, without counting the price of the installations. Without a doubt this was really unusual, so tensing his muscles, Naruto proceeded to whisper. "Main, order the idiot to stay away from the bum," Naruto asked the big guy, drawing everyone's attention, who simply got confused. "That bum isn't normal, look closely at the prosthetics he's wearing," Naruto said again, making everyone look closely, causing each and every one of them to start connecting the dots until they came to the same conclusion as Naruto. So, opening her eyes in surprise, Main was about to yell at Pyler to get away, however, it was too late when everyone saw Pyler's head explode, throwing pieces of brain and mechanical parts everywhere. Shit, a cyberpsychopath, Naruto said to himself as he once again forced his nerve endings to accelerate, causing the rapid movement of the vagabond's arm that a few moments ago were quite fast and precise now to be reduced to a slow and almost lazy movement. Looking at his companions, Naruto noticed that each and every one of them were taking different directions of action, except for a stunned Dahlia, who had remained static in the scene while the vagabond's arm began to point in her direction. You didn't have to be a genius to know that the girl wasn't going to move, so taking Dahlia's left arm, Naruto pulled her out of the trajectory of the shot, causing it to pass by. Throwing her aside and without wasting a single speck of time, Naruto now found himself running in the direction of a furious Rebecca, who was beginning to pull out her guns, with the clear intention of attacking the vagrant, who was now beginning to point in the direction of the green-haired girl. Turning in the direction of a serious Kiwi, Naruto proceeded to give her a silent order that the fine-haired blonde quickly understood, and without a single thought the blonde hacked Rebecca's system with great efficiency, causing an overload that left her out of combat. Naruto, for his part, was already grabbing Rebecca like a sack of potatoes, removing her from the trajectory of the shot that simply made a crater in the floor where the green-haired girl had been before. Quickly leaving Rebecca behind a container, Naruto quickly left his temporary hiding place with Rebecca's two pistols, and with an accuracy worthy of envy, Naruto nailed the two shots in both eyes of the cyberpsychopath, whose only movement was the slight pushback from the impact of the bullets that pierced the guy's skull. For a moment Naruto stared at the motionless body of the homeless man standing there as if nothing had happened, waiting to see if he was going to make one last reflex move. However, a certain white-haired girl who had been hiding behind the container the homeless man was now standing in thought that everything was fine and decided to leave the hiding place and turn her back on the homeless man, who in Naruto's sight, the guy's still outstretched arm, began to move in the direction of Lucy, who didn't realize her danger, so pulling the triggers of the guns Naruto had to curse for not having ammunition. Fucking hell, this has to be a joke was the thought that ran through Naruto's mind that didn't even last a second in his mind, and instead he was already taking his fifth step in the direction of a Lucy, who was starting to turn her head behind her, while her eyes opened in astonished surprise when she finally noticed that the vagrant's arm stopped in her direction, only for fire to come out of the barrel, followed by a fairly large bullet that could destroy his head without effort. Lucy really didn't know what to do, her body wasn't moving at all, and every nanosecond she was there the bullet was closer to her face. She could almost imagine the faces of each of her companions, watching the scene with clear resignation to her death. That's right, none of them were going to be able to save her, not her dream. She would simply end up there with her head smashed like a watermelon. However, Lucy never noticed a certain blonde running behind her while grabbing a piece of metal from the ground, and with the force of the impact thanks to his run, he pushed the surprised Lucy, who could only watch as Naruto raised a piece of metal, thus intercepting the large projectile that caused a small explosion that sent Naruto flying where he came from until he crashed into a container, sinking it in the process, and as if he were being chased by a raging feminist march. The air left Naruto's chrome lungs, obviously leaving him breathless. However, as agonizing as Naruto seemed, he refused to lose consciousness from the brutal impact, so taking the same dented piece of metal that he used as a shield, Naruto stood up and with all the strength he had, he threw the piece of metal like a discus in the direction of the homeless man. He did not react to the danger, allowing the piece of metal to slice his head cleanly. Remaining static at what Naruto had just done, he simply stood there watching the scene until he remembered the lack of air in his lungs, causing him to fall to his knees while breathing heavily, trying to recover the lost air. Then Naruto, are you okay? Asked a strangely worried Lucy who knelt in front of him while trying to somehow relieve him, however Naruto just raised his hand as a way to appease her. Cough cough, I'm fine, it's just shortness of breath was what Naruto said in a rather harsh way due to the slow process of recovering a normal breathing rhythm. Just give me a moment to catch my breath, Naruto said again as his heart rate calmed down and he listened to the others talking about the situation. Shit, that bastard had a pretty advanced chrome, was the complaint of an annoyed mind, while Naruto seemed to have already recovered his breath and simply stood up with the help of Lucy, who stayed next to him the whole time, and Dahlia, who had picked up Rebecca, who was barely regaining consciousness. Lucy is hurt, we have to take her to the sanatorium, Main said, looking back at Naruto, who didn't seem to have lost his breath at all and instead was as cool as ever, with that occasional smile that appeared on his face. Boy, it seems you're fine now, why don't you take Lucy to get cured? Main suggested to Naruto, who simply nodded at the order. Kiwi and I will stay for when the pigs come to clean the place, someone has to explain the mess, Main finished saying, ending the course of action they would take, so turning to see Lucy Naruto simply said. "Wait for me in the car, I'll be there in a moment," Naruto said to Lucy, who simply nodded and went back to that place to wait. After all, the wound she got wasn't that serious, since it was just a scratch on her forehead. Naruto, on the other hand, approached a silent Rebecca who stood there watching the body of the one who was once her brother standing there lazily, while blood dripped from his drooping arms. "Only I had the right to kill that idiot," was what Rebecca said while Naruto only heard the green-haired girl's statement. "Come on, why don't you go with Dahlia to the workshop and rest a little today? Today was a busy day," Naruto offered while stroking Rebecca's head. Rebecca took her gaze off her brother's body and nodded at what Naruto said, while Dahlia approached them and took Rebecca away, staying for a few seconds to watch the two girls retreat. Naruto turned around to go in the direction of his vehicle, which this time was a Mercedes-Benz AMG. So walking calmly to the car, Naruto simply opened the door and without stopping he dropped into the driver's seat heavily while turning to see a silent Lucy next to him who had finished wiping the blood from her forehead with a rag that was in the car. Without bothering to say anything about it, Naruto simply started the car and proceeded to go in the direction of the Seino killer to fix the wound on Lucy's forehead. The trip itself was quite silent as well as short. Time had vanished so quickly that the two didn't really notice it. Naruto drove in a state of induced trance without really thinking anything. Lucy, on the other hand, only saw the occasional buildings that blocked the view of the horizon as they entered the maritime highway. Absently, the two turned to see how an aircraft began to take off from the horizon in the direction of the moon. For a moment, Lucy raised her gaze towards the moon with a seemingly longing look while Naruto watched her. "It would be interesting to go to the moon," Naruto commented with apparent interest at the idea of visiting the moon someday. However, Lucy's only reaction was to slightly lower her gaze from the window, and about 5 seconds later she responded with an almost silent yes. The rest of the way there was no other interaction until arriving at the location, so letting the skinny guy who was masturbating with a hex toy and a Naruto stop doing what he was doing to attend to Lucy. The operation itself did not last more than 10 minutes when Naruto, who was still waiting for Lucy, saw her leave the place without any visible scratches, so he signaled her to get back into the car. The two of them left the place in the direction of Lucy's apartment, who again remained silent until now when she decided to speak. "Naruto," Lucy called, not wanting to see Naruto's face. "Yes?" Naruto asked calmly while giving a slight glance to the white-haired girl who remained silent for a few moments until she finally spoke again. I wanted to thank you," Lucy thanked as Naruto parked the car outside the apartment complex. "If you hadn't been there," the white-haired girl was going to say, but Naruto didn't let her finish. "There's no need to thank me," Naruto replied calmly while outside the car a light drizzle began, worsening the silence between the two. Do you want to come in?" Lucy offered to Naruto, who turned his gaze to make eye contact with the white-haired girl for a few moments while outside the rain got stronger. "Are you sure?" Naruto replied calmly, knowing exactly what Lucy meant by offering him a place to come in. After all, it was written all over her face, which had long since left behind the stoic face she always had. However, apart from her clear intentions of spending the night with him, there was still doubt in those fine features. "No," was Lucy's whispered response without taking her eyes off her blonde, who simply nodded at the answer. However, before the white-haired girl decided to get out of the car, Naruto took her cheek and gently brought her closer to his face until they were a few centimeters away, so much so that they felt each other's soft breathing. Without waiting any longer, Lucy let herself be carried away by a soft kiss that she didn't bother to resist and simply let the warmth of the kiss envelop her until about 15 seconds had passed in which Naruto broke the kiss. "Think about it," Naruto whispered as a mischievous smile crossed his face. "Who would have thought that the always serious Lucy would have worried so much about me?" Naruto joked with the clear intention of killing the previous mood to move to a happier one, so to speak. However, Lucy simply smiled softly at the joke. "You're terrible at killing moods," Lucy replied with amusement in her voice. "You know how I am, I don't like serious situations, I feel aggravated," Naruto replied with a smile since it was true. Naruto was one of those people that no matter how serious the situation was, he always seemed to ignore the serious mood to make a joke or prank. If you ever asked Lucy if there was a situation in which the blonde would be 100% serious, she would answer that even if they were talking to the president about a possible war, he would tell a joke to make the situation more lively. "Here, don't get wet," Naruto offered, effectively bringing Lucy out of her thoughts. She only saw a rain shield extended in her direction. Taking it, the white-haired girl was about to get out of the car, but not before seeing the blonde out of the corner of her eye. "See you tomorrow," Lucy said goodbye as she opened the car door, quickly followed by the rain guard. "See you, my love," Naruto said goodbye as he watched Lucy seem to shudder slightly at the way he called her, so turning to glare at him, Lucy couldn't say anything when the car door closed and Naruto simply left, leaving her there with a stopwatch, a smile and a strange feeling of tranquility. So turning around, Lucy calmly entered her apartment without really realizing that in an alley in front of the complex, there was a shadow that the whole time kept watching the car as it was moving away from the place. "I found it," the shadow said as he turned around and walked into the dark alley. 17 minutes later. Naruto entered the back of his workshop as always, and as usual the workshop was dark, which indicated that its inhabitants were already asleep, so there was Naruto getting out of the car, only to start walking between his other vehicles covered with blankets, until he reached the door that divided the workshop from the vehicles under repair, which was also dark. Again walking between the multiple car parts lying and hanging around, Naruto simply entered the living room, noticing that as expected, it was quite clean, thanks to a certain redeed. With sleep taking over his being, Naruto simply entered the room only to see the three girls sleeping peacefully in the bed that seemed to be full. "I need to buy a new bed," Naruto said to himself in a whisper as he took Rebecca in his arms and slid between Gloria and Dahlia to then accommodate the little green-haired girl on his chest while he stroked her head as a way of comforting her, after all he had lost his brother a few hours ago. Chapter 5. Night fell once again on the dangerous streets of Night City, and as if it were the preferred time, things got lively on said streets that only remained silent for a few minutes, being overshadowed by occasional shots here or there, indicating the obvious death of some passerby who was robbed or simply someone who was involved in shady things. However, although the streets were briefly silent in the departmental areas, it was not the same case for the commercial area, where, as you know, there were restaurants, shops, merchandise, bars and brothels now, so to speak. These areas were a little more controlled than the previous ones, since as it was a commercial area, it seemed to be guarded by the mafias, therefore, in a certain sense, you were safer in this area than in your own department. However, we will be focusing on what would be a fairly common bar without any kind of logo or aesthetic that characterized it. It was simply an ordinary bar in which people got drunk and prostitutes stood waiting for some drunk to ask for their services, but in reality in said bar, there was an event that was taking place, an event that particularly unlike an old cheap mafia movie, was taking place in the basement of this same bar. So going into the back room of the bar where some chefs were shabbily preparing snacks for the customers, we went straight to a door right at the back that led to some iron stairs that obviously led to the basement, revealing a group of women in bikinis around a table while they cut. Attached and stacked a mountain of $20 bills, obviously indicating that the bill was being counterfeited. While this was happening, next to that table a little far away was another table also surrounded by women in bikinis, while instead of stacking bills they measured, calculated and packed the well-known drug called cocaine. Now, while these were certainly interesting events to take into account, they were still not the event we are looking for. Said event that we are so curious to witness was located behind an ordinary-looking door at the end of the room, crossing the group of people working in the clandestine merchandise. However, before we enter through said door, why not we better focus on the peculiar group that at this moment was entering through the door that we previously crossed. This group was made up of a smiling blonde who was wearing a rather expensive-looking suit, while he dressed it in a way that made him look like a rather feared mobster. Behind him, following him, was the always serious and sarcastic Kiwi, who was smoking as usual, while also wearing a rather elegant red dress up to the thighs and tight to the body that let stand out her finely delicate and elegant curves, worthy of a model of my universe. Next to her was the always smiling Sasha, who didn't seem to leave that cat smile at any time. She was wearing almost the same clothes as Kiwi, only this one was a bright purple, while it was slit from her ankle, almost reaching her waist. A rather curious scene if we take into account that none of the three were involved in drug dealing or money laundering, but well, that was not a matter of concern at this moment, since without really showing an ounce of nervousness, the three walked around the room as if they really owned the place, all while having a conversation via phone call. "Naruto, are you sure this is going to work?" Kiwi asked with apparent calm as he continued following the blonde in front of him. "Don't worry, I've done this like 2 times before. Why do you think I suggested it in the first place?" replied a relaxed Naruto as he distractedly watched the backsides of the bikini-clad women working there. "Because the 3rd time's the charm?" asked the amused Sasha as a joke to lighten the mood. For this job Naruto was in charge, and well, apart from the 3 of them, there was no one else from the team involved, since they themselves were supported in another job apart from this one. But well, as the one in charge of the job, Naruto suggested this course of action to complete the job, and well, apparently Kiwi and Sasha, more Kiwi than Sasha, thought that this way of completing the mission was crazy. And well, Naruto didn't blame them. After all, they were used to Main's less creative ways of doing jobs, so it would be obvious to them that working the way he did was somewhat unique. Hahaha. That could be a good point, but this is not the case, so calm down and just follow my lead, Naruto finished saying as he finished crossing the room, and before entering the door, Naruto glanced at a guard guarding the door, only to receive a nod from him upon seeing the curious necklace that Naruto wore around his neck. So entering the room, Kiwi and Sasha simply resigned themselves as they followed Naruto and hoped nothing would go wrong. 2 hours later. "Buck, I lost again," was the noticeably drunk voice of a man who looked to be around 60 years old, while wearing quite expensive suits and different gold rings on his fingers. Well, he dropped a couple of cards only for a woman in a bartender's outfit to start serving 3 shots of a rather fine and expensive tequila. "Ah damn, give me that." Here was the equally drunk voice of another man of equally important appearance as the previous one. Well, he had quite a few gold necklaces and his constitution was somewhat thin, but he still looked 58 years old, which was already beginning to reflect in the gray of his hair. "Well, I guess it can't be helped. Hey honey, why don't you pass me that shot?" was said by a Naruto who was also obviously quite drunk. Well, a serious Kiwi just did as he asked and stood up from Naruto's left thigh, where she had been sitting for about 45 minutes. This was no different for Sasha, who remained on Naruto's right thigh. Well, she seemed to be having more fun than her, since she also seemed to be taking some shots of that expensive tequila. It's okay, Kiwi wouldn't lie, she was also a little drunk. Very well, she is more than drunk, but hey, don't judge her, she still kept control of her body, so her drunkenness wasn't that serious at the moment, and well, she still wanted to finish the job. Well, you could say she was having a little good time, but leaving it behind. Kiwi didn't actually let Naruto snatch the shot from her, and instead she herself brought the shot to the blonde's mouth, who happily drank it like it was water. Hey, shit, this is good," Naruto exclaimed eagerly, while the others could only nod at what the blonde said. "I'm telling you, this stuff was exported from Nigeria, so it's pretty good," said Mobster 1 with satisfaction for having a pretty large repertoire of high-quality bottles. "Buck, you're going to have to tell me who's bringing this stuff, I'm going to buy a bunch," said Mobster 2 with a lot of interest in the drink. Well, Mobster 3, who had won and therefore hadn't taken a shot, shuffled the cards. However, this one didn't seem any different from the others in terms of his level of drunkenness. "Haha, take it for granted," was the response of Mobster 1, only for a relaxed Naruto, thanks to the symptoms of alcohol, to ask something. "Anyway, you have to tell me, and is that shit good or not?" Naruto asked while pointing to a briefcase next to the Mobster 1, who had in fact been introduced to them an hour and a half before. Inside it was a set of 6 transparent plastic packages that contained a substance similar to cocaine, only this one, instead of being white, it was a neon blue color that seemed to glow with any ray of light that hit it. Now, although it had been presented to them previously, it was only presented to them as a new drug. Apart from that, they were not given any more details because of confidentiality. However, Naruto's question could not be misinterpreted as someone wanting to know more about the drug to make some possible replicas. No, Naruto's question was simply if the drug was good, so there was no problem with asking the question. "I can assure you this is the best drug with illusionary effects that has been created in the entire decade. I'm sure it will quickly become popular," explained Mobster 1 with greed written all over his face. "It would be quite interesting to test its effects firsthand," Naruto said curiously. However, Naruto had never taken drugs, since the concept of taking drugs was quite like saying it well, it didn't catch his attention. "Do you want to try it? It's my treat," offered Mobster 1 as he took a package out of the briefcase, only to see Naruto shake his head. "No thanks, sorry, I'm not one for drugs," Naruto calmly rejected, only to hear Kiwi's voice speaking to him on a call. "Naruto, our contractor contacted me, I think it's time to finish the job," Kiwi informed with a slightly relaxed voice, implying how drunk she was. "Ugh, that asshole always taking the fun out of everything," Naruto grumbled at the call only to pat Sasha and Kiwi's waist and buttocks as an indication that they should prepare for anything that didn't go well. Now, although the two felt Naruto's hands give more than a simple pat, they didn't seem to be bothered either by the high level of alcohol or simply because they didn't care. "Well, my people, I guess we can't spend any more time together, unfortunately duty calls me," Naruto said calmly, drawing the attention of the gangsters along with the 3 guards who were in each corner of the room in front of Naruto. "You're leaving so fast. It's a shame," said Mobster 2 while taking another shot of tequila. "Yes, a real pity," Naruto supported while giving 2 light pats on the waist to Kiwi and Sasha, who got the message to get up from his lap, which they simply proceeded to obey calmly, only to be followed by the blonde who also stood up, ready to say a few last words. "But well, I guess I have to kill them, it's a real shame, you know," Naruto commented without worrying in the least about the murder comment from those present. However, this confused those present who could only ask one question. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" asked Mafioso 1 in confusion, causing the blonde, who at this moment seemed to be rummaging through his suit jacket, to look up in equal confusion. "Huh? The part about it being a pity?" Naruto asked with innocent confusion. No, about you being going to kill us," corrected Mobster 3, to which Naruto's comically perplexed face went completely still in a scene of pure comical discomfort until the blonde simply let out a chuckle. "Hahaha. Kill them? Who said that?" Naruto mocked with amusement, pretending he hadn't said the previous thing. This small, drunken laugh made the 3 gangsters join him in a laugh of understanding that what the blonde had said had only been a joke. "Can you imagine? Me killing them? PFFF please, Naruto continued mockingly along with the other three gangsters who joined him in unbridled laughter. I can imagine, Mobster 2 commented with laughter, only to be followed by the blonde's next comment. Ahahaha. Well, good that you imagined it because that's exactly what's going to happen, was Naruto's last comment. As he continued with his sentence he was becoming serious. Well, once again he forced his brain to enter stress mode, and everything around him slowed down only for his body in a moment of pure reflex to already be taking out the two silenced pistols from his suit jacket in a movement so fluid that anyone present didn't even notice the subtle and fluid movement of his hands when the blonde was already aiming and pulling the trigger in the direction of two of the three guards in the room. Not a microsecond after the bullet left the silencer's barrel, Naruto was already moving both pistols to his two new targets, who were guard who was just realizing what was happening, and the mobster one, who still seemed to be laughing at how ridiculous it sounded to be killed by the blonde, who without realizing it was exactly what he was about to do. Once again Naruto pulled the trigger of the guns while he noticed that the other two mobsters, in an impulsive reaction to find out what was happening, quickly got upset and hit the table hard, causing a certain briefcase with some drugs to fly through the air. However, that was no impediment for the two bullets that Naruto had already fired to pass pure and close millimeters from each of the bags of drugs, only to reach their destination, which were the skulls of the last two mobsters in the room. However, that's how it is. It only took a single variation in the area for everything that had happened perfectly timed and measured to perfection before Naruto's brightly neon blue eyes to turn into chaos. That, however, was a small piece of lead, better known as a bullet, that he hadn't fired, to make its way into his sight and, as far as Naruto knew, appeared from his right side where Sasha was supposed to be, who at that moment was aiming with her equally silenced pistol. Naruto, on the other hand, just watched a bullet travel across the room, its collision with a packet of drugs imminent, and well, I imagine you're already getting an idea of what happened next. Half of the room had turned a neon blue. Well, to be more specific, the side where the trio of assassins were standing was where it was the most blue, leaving a silhouette on the wall of the only three present in the room. Once again Naruto's friend's silence fell in the room, only allowing the women in bikinis on the other side to be heard working on the clandestine merchandise. However, the silent room where the three were quietly standing was broken by the sound of Naruto's hands dropping to one side, while his now blue face, along with the entire front of his clothes, seemed to have a totally impassive expression only for a second after a small blue powder came out of his mouth, implying that he had consumed the drug out of pure surprise at what happened. Slowly turning his face to his two companions, the blonde quickly noticed that both of them, like him, were covered in the product, while they also coughed up a blue powder, implying the obvious. Well, this was an unexpected development, Naruto commented calmly, given the situation they were in at the moment. Don't tell me, really. If you don't tell me, I won't notice, was the sarcastic response from the always calm Kiwi. Blue suits you, you should wear it more often, maybe you should dye your hair too, Naruto responded sarcastically to Kiwi's comment. He was about to respond only to be interrupted by Sasha, who watched their interaction with a raised eyebrow. I don't see you worried about the situation we're in, Sasha commented, looking at the two who turned their gaze towards her. Well, you don't seem worried either. I mean, your smile says otherwise, Naruto said expressionlessly, pointing at the big smile the black-haired girl had in front of them. Smile? What are you talking about? I'm not smiling, Sasha was saying, only to be stopped when she saw with curious confusion her reflection in a mirror on the other side of the room, and it was true, she had a big smile on her face. Whatever, we're done with the job, so get going, Naruto was going to say, only for an eyebrow to rise in confusion upon noticing someone speaking. What did you say? Naruto asked in Kiwi's direction, who raised an eyebrow in confusion. I haven't said anything. Once again she was interrupted when a singing voice reached the three's ears, so turning their gaze slowly in the direction of what had to be the corpse of Mobster 1, they finally noticed that he was looking at them while he seemed to be singing something. Oh no, I hope I don't fall, was what the corpse said while inexplicably the sound of a guitar along with something breaking and what seemed to be the bass of some music began to play in the background, and the three noticed how the room around them began to tear, and from one moment to the next, they opened, revealing a bunch of giant eyes that only seemed to be focusing on them. Very well, I'm going to confirm it, said Naruto as he turned towards his two companions, who had a spaced out look along with their abnormally wide pupils, just like the blonde. We're drugged, Naruto finished saying, now strangely amused, as he watched Kiwi and Sasha approach him and begin to grope Naruto's face, as if it were the strangest thing they had ever seen in their lives. However, before Naruto could comment, the two women removed their hands from his face in obvious surprise. You're a police cat, was said by a shocked Sasha as she pointed at him accusingly, causing Naruto to laugh at how ridiculous her statement was. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto asked, laughing only to see Kiwi pointing in the direction of the mirror, so turning his gaze Naruto saw the most surreal thing in his life. He was a cat. Fuck me. I'm a police cat. shouted a hysterical Naruto upon seeing himself in the mirror as a small cat wearing what looked like a SWAT team. Well, at least it's not just you, Kiwi is also a cat, Sasha pointed out, making Naruto turn his gaze in the direction of the sarcastic blonde. He only noticed that she was certainly also a cat wearing a police suit, just lighter. Bucking Sasha stopped doing that. Now it was Kiwi's turn to rant when he noticed his body was now a cat. What are you talking about? We're all cats. Look, I'm a cat too, what are you complaining about? Sasha grumbled, pointing at her cat body to the two people present, who simply remained silent, not noticing that the room had adapted to the same size as it would have been when they were in their human forms. Sigh, this is going to be a long night, sighed Naruto while patting his face with his cat paws. However, before anyone could say anything else, the radio that was attached to his chest began to emit a voice. Attention. Cat Assault Group, we have at 12:31 at the Tower Ring Bank, was the voice that came out of the radio while, as if they had really been police officers their whole lives, the three left the room in an epic scene, as if they were the cover of some JoJo movie or manga, along with an equally epic musical background. Let's get to work, we have a case to attend to, Naruto said with authority. Time jumped the next morning. Ugh was the cacophonous moan that was heard in what at first glance seemed to be a rather small and peculiar room, judging by the few details that could be noticed thanks to how dark the room remained. However, a small and minuscule ray of sunlight began to make itself present in the room, illuminating it in the most agonizing and slow way possible, revealing that what we previously thought was a room was actually a kind of cabin, in which there were two lines of stations on each side facing each other, while some other devices were on the metal walls. However, the next thing that the not-so-sudden arrival of morning revealed was the fact that in the middle of this cabin was a large bundle of sheets that were beginning to move with an apparent agonizing discomfort. Arg shit, my damn back, was now the moan of a rather hoarse voice coming from the bundle of tangles in the middle of the cabin, thus revealing that whoever was staying under those sheets was waking up from a very heavy and uncomfortable nap, if the way he had said his sentence was any indication. Ouch, well, where am I? Questioned another voice equally hoarse from sleep, only this time it was a female voice unlike the previous one. However, his question did not receive a prompt answer, and instead the only thing he received in return was another equally feminine moan. Ugh, what a headache, was the third consecutive moan heard in the cabin of wherever they were. Finally, after a couple more moans from the inhabitants of the cabin, a rather familiar face finally peeked out from under the sheets, with the most impassive face he could ever have had, along with his disheveled hair. Followed by the blonde commonly known as Naruto came out from under the sheets. He was quickly followed by an equally impassive Kiwi, who, as if it were a practiced scene, also had the most impassive face she could muster, while making a gigantic effort to recognize the place in which she was. As if it wasn't enough, not even a second after the usually sarcastic Kiwi finally gave up trying to guess where she was, an equally disheveled Sasha peeked out from under the sheets, sitting to the right of Naruto while Kiwi was on the left side. Once the three of them were sitting in a seemingly never-ending silence, the three of them simply entered that familiar trance, where they kept staring at a shoe, as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. They just stood there while their minds and neurons suffered a paralysis of thought until further notice. 8 minutes later, and finally our blonde protagonist finally felt that this would be a good time to finally study his surroundings, so looking around Naruto could only deduce that they were in what he recognized as the cockpit of an aircraft. Now if Naruto was surprised when he saw his companions, he did not give a single indication of it, and simply delighted in the sight of Kiwi and Sasha's open tits, who were also beginning to notice that they, like Naruto, were apparently naked from the top, and with the arrival of that thought came another, so as a totally synchronized movement of the three present, they lifted the sheets to see with comically impassive faces that indeed the three did not have lower garments, and along with it came some memories. Memory. On a particularly starry night, an almost imperceptible, somewhat square and rounded figure flew over the cold desert, while the distinctive red and blue lights of any police vehicle or aircraft it carried illuminated the sky, revealing the location of the aircraft that seemed to have emerged from the most epic chase in history. After all, the lights revealed scratches like some marks from high-caliber bullets bouncing off the aircraft's armor. Now anyone at first glance would think that said aircraft was on some kind of expedition with the purpose of finding a fugitive from the law. However, that deduction was so far from the truth that if you told her the real reason why that ship was flying over the place, she would simply respond with an, "Are you crazy?" But well, you couldn't blame her, after all they didn't know what was happening inside. Inside the aircraft. Book. Damn it, are you trying to leave me paralyzed? Was what was said between moans by a panting Sasha while she wrapped her hands and legs around a Naruto, who simply looked at her with those equally wide pupils, indicating his current state of drugs in his system. "I can't help it, this pussy of yours is majestic," was the blonde's response as he accelerated his thrusts, causing the brunette's head to tilt back along with her eyes in what was the most cosmic orgasmic experience she had ever felt in her entire life, only to feel for the umpteenth time the warm sensation of thick semen flooding her uterus to the brim once again. "Asp, this has to be nirvana," was the only thing the black-haired girl could whisper before falling into a deep sleep, so gently leaving her on the floor of the aircraft, Naruto was called by another female voice, only to feel other arms hugging him from behind, while pressing some not so big, but at the same time not so small breasts on his back. "I hope you haven't forgotten about me," was the voice of a certain blonde in Naruto's ear who could only smile. "And I haven't done it," Naruto replied as he quickly turned around and grabbed Kiwi's small waist, only to make her lean over the aircraft's control system, while now he was the one who clung to her from behind and proceeded to whisper something in her ear. "I hope you're ready because I'm going to give it to you doggy style so much that you'll get scared with the fireworks," was the sarcastic comment said by Naruto as he aligned the tip of his cock with the vagina previously overflowing with some semen residue, indicating his previous insertions. So with a slow and chaotic thrust, the blonde netrunner felt each inch slide inside her, expanding her in a way that she felt like a virgin again for almost the sixth time that night. However, she did not want to stay like that and proceeded to say a scathing comment. "Come on, buck this bitch of yours as much as you want," Kiwi encouraged as he pushed his ass back, completely shoving the last few inches inside her, as her slit parted noticeably from the large piece of meat inside her. Without really waiting a second longer, the wave of orgasmic thrusts began, and the carnal pleasure between two blondes once again flooded the cabin of the aircraft that just continued flying lazily around the desert. Present. After these memories flooded their minds, the three present did not have the courage or the decency to make any gesture on their faces other than a simple and almost muffled sound from their mouths while they raised their expressionless faces. "Oh" was the only thing that came out of the mouths of the trio of individuals while they weighed everything that had happened in a single night, or well, they tried to remember what had happened. However, after a few seconds without apparent results, they finally stopped trying and instead got out from under the sheets without really caring about the others' nudity or their own. "I guess," Naruto was going to say, however, the familiar sound of an incoming call reached each of the three, who simply answered, and not a second later the annoyed voice of a main who was surely boiling with anger was heard. "You three come to the base already and explain to me what the hell happened," ordered the pissed off main, then proceeded to close the call and leave the trio in silence again until Kiwi proceeded to speak. "This certainly isn't good," was what the fine blonde said while receiving a nod from the blonde. "Yeah, I guess I'll talk to him," Naruto offered calmly as he took his boxers and pants and proceeded to put them on, then headed to the aircraft's cockpit, ready to fly it to the base. Chapter 6. Tension. That was the only word that could come close to defining the mood that loomed over the lair of a certain group of cyberpunks dedicated to criminal work. Along with it, the only thing that prevented the uncomfortable silence from appearing was the fact that a holographic screen was transmitting the news, where they obviously reported on the most relevant incidents that had happened yesterday, as well as those of today. And as if it were a bad mob movie, a serious main remained seated on a sofa while he was flanked by his wife Dorio, who simply stood there watching them with some amusement. Apparently she seemed to find some amusement in the scene in front of her, since in front of her were standing some Kiwi next to a really silent Sasha flanking a Naruto, who actually seemed to be more bothered by the silence between the group than the very reason why he was there at this moment. Now surely Naruto had said it a few times before, but he wasn't someone to stay quiet, watching how tension took over his surroundings, or how when a conversation became too serious, Naruto always had the need to break that tension. Honestly, for him, it was like they were trying to relive a scene from a movie, and well, he didn't know why, but it bothered him. In fact, he could already smell that when he was about to say something, the strong man in front of him playing the role of a mobster would interrupt him to start giving him a sermon, but well, that was better than staying quiet waiting for Main to dare to speak. So Naruto was going to say, only for Main to abruptly interrupt him as he had predicted and start cursing. "You know, I really don't care what you guys do in your free time," the strongman began with his always hoarse voice, well, as if it were some kind of way to intimidate the blonde. He let out his favorite weapon, which was a cannon hidden in his forearm. This action made Naruto raise an eyebrow in curiosity. Absent-mindedly he noticed how Dahlia contracted her muscles a little, as well as Rebecca seemed to move her hand closer to her heavy rifle, and Lucy, well, she really didn't know what to do if her drastic eye movements were anything to go by. But anyway, Naruto was taken out of his thoughts when Main continued with his little rant. "But when they do something that directly harms us, that's a different story," Main continued again, making Naruto's face contort in pure confusion, therefore unable to resist these accusations that he clearly didn't make, or rather, doesn't remember. Naruto found himself in the painful need to interrupt the mountain of metal that was Main. Did you think he was going to say mountain of muscles? Well, that would be the case if his body wasn't made of metal. Wow, slow down a bit there, hey, look, I appreciate you taking the time and trouble to create a dramatic scene from a Sam Mendes movie, but Kiwi and Sasha too did something to hurt the team, Naruto was saying, only for everyone to turn their gazes in the direction of the holographic screen when the main reporter of the newscast touched on a topic that caught their attention. In more recent news, a group of 3 criminals stole a V-20 Charger ship from the police right under their noses, with the excuse that they were going to solve a robbery at the Tower Ring Bank. We leave you with the images, reported the reporter with some enthusiasm. Well, the image of the news changed to one in which said ship was flying over the city, while being followed by a couple more ships that tried to stop them. However, that did not seem to work when in the middle of the chase the ship that was being chased crashed into another, causing it to lose control, causing it to crash into another, and together they crashed into some abandoned warehouse in the red light area of Night City. These images were seen by the group of said criminals who could only watch the scene with expressionless faces and without really knowing how they could react or proceed. Instead, they simply decided to ignore what they had just seen and instead just resumed the conversation they were in. Cough, from what I know the only ones who seem to be screwed here are Kiwi, Sasha and I. Naruto finished saying, only for Main to punch the small table that separated them and with already noticeable annoyance, throw the remains of the poor table to the side. You screwed us all. Now you 3 are possibly at the top of the list of the worst criminals now wanted in Night City, Main scolded as he approached threateningly the blonde who didn't even twitch a muscle before the growing threat that approached him. That was summed up in a furious Main. Ooh, come on, we just stole a police ship, surely there have been people who have done worse things than that, calmed Naruto, only for her to once again, and as if karma had possessed the reporter, she once again began to talk about the topic they were discussing. The criminals ended up destroying the bank they were supposed to rescue from a possible robbery, and as if that were not enough, they returned to the police base and completely destroyed it, claiming that they had been betrayed. I'll leave you with the images, the reporter reported again, while the screen changed again to one in which Naruto appeared firing a missile launcher that crashed into a police ship that descended until it crashed into the police base. In the background you could see how some drugged Kiwi and Sasha were driving an armored car that had a turret anchored to the roof. While all this was happening, you could hear Naruto shouting incoherently that they had betrayed him and that they were going to pay for the 10 years he worked under his government. Okay, Naruto was already thinking that it was too much of a coincidence that when he was denying something this bitch of a reporter appeared to screw up his denials. However, the fact that the specialized police to stop cyberpsychopaths couldn't stop them, even with their most arduous attempts, seemed brutally funny to him, so he couldn't help but let out a small laugh, calling everyone's attention. Naruto laughed only to feel Main grab him by the neck of his yakker tightly and then abruptly lift him up to his not-so-friendly face. Very well, Naruto, why don't you explain to us all what you find so funny? Come on, we are very intrigued, Main asked threateningly to a Naruto who kept that smile on his face, as if at no time in this situation he had been in danger, and well, in a certain way it was, since he could already openly see how Rebecca was pointing her heavy rifle at Main. Dahlia tensed her muscles even more, prepared for what was coming. Kiwi grabbed the handle of her pistol that was hidden in the long side of her dress, and although she seemed to want to defend Naruto, she seemed a little more interested in calming Main. The same happened with Sasha and Dorio, the latter completely to calm Main and Lucy. Well, although she took out her weapons that consisted of some quite sharp threads, she seemed to be more worried about protecting herself than anything else, but well, leaving that aside, Naruto simply answered as if he was talking to a friend. Listen, because this is sure going to be a blessing, Naruto began, causing Main's fist to clench a little tighter as a sign of annoyance at the blonde who didn't seem to be afraid of him. However, everyone saw how Naruto pointed towards the holographic screen. Just look, these police officers are specialized in neutralizing cyberpsychopaths with high levels of integrated weaponry up to military grade. Don't you find it funny that you're not even capable of neutralizing 3 drugged people? Naruto finally explained, letting him know what he found funny. However, no one in the room seemed to share the amusement with the blonde, or well, that's what it seemed, since almost imperceptibly a smiling Rebecca had to cover her mouth to prevent a laugh from coming out. Dahlia seemed to do the same, only more discreetly. Sasha's cheeks puffed out a little as a sign of amusement. Kiwi looked away, trying to hide the slight blush of amusement. Lucy had a small smile, understanding what was funny, and Dorio, she had a big smile while grabbing her stomach, obviously trying to contain the laughter that was about to come out. However, Main remained unbreakable. Oh come on Main, relax, don't you think it's funny? Just look at them trying to surround us without being able to have a look how the police ship falls on him, Naruto said, and pointed with enthusiasm, while everyone saw how certainly a policeman seemed to be running away scared shitless, only for a ship engulfed in flames to fall on him, causing an unmanly shriek to come out of his mouth. However, Main didn't even react and instead simply loosened his grip, letting go of Naruto, who simply let out a sigh of exasperation. Sigh okay look, you win if it seems alright to you. When everything calms down I'm going to do something to solve the matter, Naruto informed calmly, calling everyone's attention once again, due to the confidence with which he had said those words. After all, he had 97% of the national police, and 80% of the police specialized in neutralizing cyberpsychopaths after his heads. What could he do to fix this matter? And specifically, what can you do to fix this? Main asked with that obvious annoyance in her voice as she looked at Naruto, who simply dismissed the question as something temporary. Just leave it to me, in a couple of weeks everything will be back to normal, Naruto dismissed calmly as he stood between Kiwi and Sasha to circle his arms behind them, pulling them closer to him. And the three of us will once again be walking the streets as if this had never happened, Naruto finished as if he had already been in this situation, and well, actually, it was true, he had already been in this situation, well, maybe more than once, but hey, why don't we leave the suspense for later? Well, if that's all I guess I'm going, Naruto began, removing his arms from around Kiwi and Sasha, but not before giving their buttocks a good squeeze, making them whinny at the sudden squeeze. However, they didn't complain about it. After all, they had already bucked, which by the way was the best buck they had ever had in their entire lives. How did they know? Well, the ship had cameras inside, and even so it was not necessary to see them to know that they had had the best hex, since when they woke up this morning they felt so fulfilled and light that they thought they could fly away at any moment. Come on Dahlia, Rebecca, let's go, Naruto called to his two lovers, who nodded and walked to his side. However, before they completely left the place, Naruto turned his gaze in the direction of Kiwi and Sasha. Oh, by the way, Kiwi and Sasha, feel free to come visit me, to discuss the arrangements for our exoneration, was Naruto's last comment that obviously had ulterior motives. Once again, they obviously instantly grasped the intentions with which this invitation was directed, and, as if it were an afterthought, Naruto also gave Lucy a discreet glance, who also saw it, causing her to simply look away in thought. Once the blonde was no longer there, silence fell again, only broken by the annoyed sigh of a certain Main, who was holding his head in front of this whole situation that had happened. Sigh, seriously, this brat is going to make me lose my temper before time, Main complained with annoyance, while noticing how his hands began to tremble, as clear indications that his brain was no longer recognizing this body as his own. However, this comment seemed to have touched a nerve in Dorio, who frowned at what was said. Don't joke like that, Dorio scolded angrily, simply watching as Main continued to stare at his trembling hand, almost as if he were ecstatic. However, he snapped out of his absent-minded state when he felt Dorio's hand rest on his shoulder. Yes, was Main's only response, leaving an awkward atmosphere in the place. Time skip Naruto workshop. In what obviously had to be a red car covered with a blanket that only showed part of the front bumper, along with the characteristic Toyota logo, was being suspended in the air by a lift made specifically for car use, and that any other workshop would surely have for the use of car repairs. Under the car, a quiet, sweaty, oil-stained blonde with many more dirt stains while only wearing pants was obviously fixing some part that had to do with the car's transmission, or to be more specific, it was the entire transmission itself after all. Said part was lazily mounted on a table, showing that it certainly had a lot of dents, leaving it totally useless as far as operation was concerned. But well, our blonde protagonist was so focused that he didn't even notice the figure approaching his back until he felt hands gently run up his abs until they rested on his muscular chest. So, stopping what he was doing, Naruto just let out an amused smile when he recognized and saw out of the corner of his eye a certain older brown-haired girl who was giving him a kind smile, not caring that she would get dirty with the multiple oil and dirt stains that Naruto had on him. Turning around to face the brunette, Naruto let Gloria change her grip to his neck while he took her by the waist and lifted her up until she was sitting on a tool table that ended up falling off it because there wasn't enough room to occupy Gloria's well-formed and tight ass. Without waiting any longer, the two immersed themselves in a sensual kissing session while the brunette felt Naruto gently squeeze her beautiful ass. However, as good as this kissing session was, at some point it had to end, therefore, moving away a little from the blonde, effectively breaking the kiss, Gloria proceeded to speak. You don't know how much I would like to continue with this until possibly moving to the next level, but it seems that we have two visitors that require your presence, Gloria informed with a flirtatious smile, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at what his wife said. Oh? Really? And who could these two people be? Naruto asked calmly, moving away from Gloria, who calmly got off the table while she watched Naruto dry his sweat with a rag. Well, Dahlia said they were two co-workers, Gloria replied, causing Naruto to pause slightly in his actions, only to continue with his own thing until he finally felt clean enough to be comfortable. Let's go then, was Naruto's only response as he took a simple t-shirt and then started walking towards the door that led to the main workshop, being followed by a calm Gloria. Stepping through the door with a steady degree of calm, Naruto quickly noticed the mop of finely cut blonde hair and the tactical dress with the characteristic red color that the always sarcastic Kiwi always wore. Next to her was the normally smiling Sasha, who, like Kiwi, always seemed to be wearing that shiny leather suit tight to the body with the pink and white jacket with a gun and holster on her thigh. But stopping to think about that, Naruto simply approached the group, who only kept watching as Dahlia and Rebecca seemed to be really focused on a particularly complicated game, so not wasting any more time, Naruto decided to make his presence known. Well, it's been a while since I saw you two, tell me what you're talking about." Naruto greeted with a relaxed smile as he plopped down on the couch in front of the holographic TV next to Kiwi, who simply stood there watching Naruto and then responded as only she could. "Oh yeah, right, it's been a long and chaotic few days, long enough to forget something important," Kiwi commented sarcastically, making Naruto and Sasha giggle at the sarcastic comment. "Aha, has certainly quite a while, but well, I guess you're here to know how I'm going to deal with our situation," Naruto guessed, which was actually more than obvious, but still sounded interesting to say it like that. This answer was responded with a simple nod from the two. "Okay, in that case it would be better if we went. I need you to do something to carry out the plan," asked Naruto, standing up from the sofa, being observed by the two women, since as far as Dahlia and Rebecca were concerned, they surely wouldn't leave there if there was no fervent attempt. So starting to walk again the way he came, Naruto proceeded to say goodbye to the other woman on the spot. "Gloria, I'm going out for a moment," Naruto said goodbye to Gloria, who was currently in the kitchen preparing dinner. So saying goodbye, Naruto finally entered the second workshop, which seemed to be the car park due to the multiple cars covered with sheets, highlighting the red car that Naruto was working on a few moments ago. "I guess I'll have to get a truck or some car that can carry more passengers," Naruto commented, looking around almost as if he was weighing which car to take. However, no car present there seemed to have the capacity to carry more than 2 passengers, either because Naruto knew it or because the silhouette of the savannah obviously said they weren't. However, an idea seemed to cross Naruto's mind, and he resumed his walk among the many cars until he finally came to a car that seemed to be almost forgotten, either because it was in a corner where it was almost invisible, or because the savannah seemed to have a lot of pulse, except for the driver's side and the hood, implying that Naruto still gave it its due maintenance, so that no part would be damaged after all. Naruto loved his cars. "We're going in this one," Naruto said as he grabbed a sheet and uncovered it in one fell swoop, revealing a black Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution with white letter designs on the sides. On the front, just below the engine cover, you could see the two 6-horsepower turbochargers that gave the car insane power. And well, if Naruto were to ask him what else the car had, he could spend an entire hour explaining how beautiful and powerful his car was if Naruto liked cars that much. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go," said Naruto, getting in the driver's side while being seen by his two companions, who were wondering if each of the cars covered in sheets were equally tuned as this one, because although they weren't as fanatic about cars, they still knew for sure what those turbochargers that stood out were. But stopping to think about it, they simply approached and got into the car just in time for Naruto to start the engine, producing a roar that sincerely relaxed Naruto's mind. Behind them, the roller doors of the garage workshop began to open, revealing the dark streets of the red light district of the city. "Ready?" Naruto asked his two passengers, who simply looked at each other while raising an eyebrow at the question. After all, they were only going to go out in this car. Naruto actually noticed the confusion of the two, and well, it was not out of hope, since this was possibly going to be the first time they were going out with him somewhere. Of course, that was not counting when they got high, because none of the three remembered anything from that night. "Ooh, come on, we're in a supercar. Did you really think I was going to drive like an old woman?" Naruto said with amusement as he noticed how the two understood what Naruto meant. However, not waiting for either of them to respond, Naruto pressed the accelerator pedal, causing the car to begin to reverse at high speed until once outside the workshop it began to spin, skidding, while quickly changing pace without stopping skidding, and now starting to go forward at all, while hearing the surprised squeals of his two companions, who saw how Naruto entered a somewhat narrow alley until he came out to the side of what was the front of his workshop in a pretty cool skid, effectively moving away through the dark streets of the red light district of the city. Now, the fact that at this moment there wasn't a single police officer chasing Naruto for the multiple violations he had already broken in the 15 minutes he had been driving spoke volumes about how bad the city was at this moment when it comes to police force. After all, they had suffered a fairly large number of casualties with the small chow that the group had put together inside the Mitsubishi Lancer that was moving quickly through the streets. Meanwhile, inside the car. "God. Can't you slow down a little? Kiwi asked with some tension judging by how hard he was holding onto the grips in the car. However, the fact that Naruto was now reaching 200 kilometers per hour on a road that was obviously 60 kilometers long didn't seem to really bother a certain black-haired girl who just smiled in amusement when Naruto once again made another change, causing fire to come out of the exhausts and finally reached 200 kilometers per hour. Diggle Kiwi, Naruto called calmly, well as if it were almost a lazy movement. He began to take his gaze off the road to pay more attention to the blonde passenger who was on his right. This action seemed to make Kiwi more nervous, judging by the quick movements of his head that isolated him between the road and Naruto. Just listen to it, doesn't it seem like an intoxicating sound to you? Naruto asked, as if just hearing the sound of the engine roaring like a raging animal was music to his ears. What are you doing? Could we crash? Were Kiwi's nervous questions only to hear an excited Sasha who watched with excitement as the structures on either side blurred due to the speed. However, she turned her gaze back to Naruto when he spoke again. Listen to me, listen to how he talks, Naruto said with amusement as he made another change and pressed the pedal to the floor, causing a louder roar to be produced by the engine, while the car's revolutions reached a new level of power, judging by the fact that the exhaust pipes were now maintained with a permanent fire emerging from within. However, the nervousness that surrounded Kiwi was now slowly fading away little by little when why? Well, the fact that his life was trapped in a car at 370 kilometers per hour made things around him honestly not matter anymore. Exactly, Kiwi at this moment didn't have a single worry. There were no jobs to do, there were no people to hack, there were no systems to hack. He didn't have all the city's authorities under his head. Nothing, they were just a calm Naruto who looked at her with that smile. On his face, an ecstatic Sasha herself and an engine with 18,000 horsepower running at its maximum capacity. I see you understand now, Naruto said calmly, noticing how the previously nervous Kiwi was now completely still, watching how the path in front of them seemed to take the form of a tunnel. These are the moments when nothing matters more than reaching the finish line in a race, Naruto commented, pointing to a traffic light at the end of the tunnel that they would be reaching in less than 4 seconds. Why are you showing me this? Kiwi asked Naruto, who didn't respond and instead simply slowed down so he could drift to the right, all without taking his eyes off Kiwi. I don't know, I guess I like you was her only response, leaving the topic there, a simple answer that stayed in the blonde netrunner's head. Change of scene. Things were calmer after that little scene. Kiwi for the moment had remained calmer than usual, and Sasha, well, the black-haired girl, acted as calm as usual. That's right, she acted like a sweet cat. However, her attitude should not fool you, since she was not a netrunner for nothing, since she had realized something very important. They were getting too close to the police area, so making her doubt known, the black-haired girl proceeded to ask with a certain degree of curiosity, while slowly moving her hand in the direction of her gun. Naruto? What are we doing here? Sasha asked curiously as she looked around cautiously. This suddenly alert attitude of Sasha made Kiwi finally come out of her half-daze to realize where they were. This certainly caused her to become equally alert, so changing her ecstatic look to the normally fine and serious one she always had, she turned her gaze towards Naruto, who at all times remained calm. However, she calmly glanced at her two companions. Relax, nothing's going to happen to us, said Naruto as he turned left, revealing that they were about to go under a bridge. However, as quickly as they turned, another car appeared on the other side of the bridge. It was a black car, judging by the logo on the front it was a Mercedes. However, none of that alerted Naruto's two companions. No, what alerted them was the fact that on the car's dashboard were the typical lights that identify police cars. That is why the two of them tensed up, alert when Naruto simply advanced forward, getting closer and closer to the police car. However, the fact that Naruto did not seem alert at all confused them. They were seconds of pure tension for the two netrunners, who didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether to attack the obviously police car, flee the place, hoping they wouldn't get caught, or simply play along with Naruto's game, as if this was an everyday thing, and before the two realized it, Naruto had already stopped next to the other in tense silence. However, the tension increased when both Naruto and the driver of the other car began to lower the windows at the same time until they were finally completely down, revealing that in the other car there was a man in a business suit with the police logo printed on it. The man looked about 60 years old, but beyond that he had no other notable feature. For a moment no one dared to say anything at all. Not a single word came out of the two, or well, that was until the man decided to speak. "You know, you really showed off this time," was the only comment from the stoic man, who simply looked at Naruto as if it was nothing. However, Naruto didn't even bother to answer after all. Anything he said was heard by the microphones that the police car had, so putting his hand in his pocket, Naruto took out a fairly large silver coin with intricate designs, and in the middle of it had a skull. So pressing a rather small button on the coin, it opened like a lid, revealing a hidden space that had a fingerprint marked with blood. So without wasting time, Naruto pricked his finger and then placed his own fingerprint in the empty space and calmly handed it to the man, while pointing at Kiwi and Sasha as an obvious indication that he wanted the favor to apply to them as well. The man on the other hand simply stared at the coin calmly until he finally let out a sigh of annoyance and took the coin while inspecting the mark and making sure that everything was okay. Once he was sure that everything was okay, he closed the coin only for a single blink in his eyes. I will say the only indication that he had connected to the police system. Well, he ordered a couple of things and that's it. His eyes stopped blinking to return his gaze to the blonde who was waiting for confirmation. Ready this morning, everything that happened was just a drill done by the police themselves, the man confirmed calmly without really revealing what he was talking about in the first place. Please make sure you don't make these disasters again. You don't want to waste all those favors on this, was the last thing the man said before he rolled up the car window again as he drove away, leaving behind the trio of ex-criminals wanted by the law in an awkward silence. Or well, that was how it was until Naruto turned to look at them with a smile. Well, that's all. What do you say if we're going to get some money in street races? Naruto offered calmly to the two netrunners who simply stared at him with a face that didn't really identify, but if he were asked to guess he would say that they were in a rather high state of confusion. However, his brief musings stopped when the only one who responded was the black-haired feline. What the hell just happened? Chapter 7. The authorities confess that this whole disaster was nothing more than a poorly planned drill, was the voice heard in the quiet but almost dusty workshop of a certain blonde, while the warm rays of sunlight slipped through one or another window, illuminating the different types of engines or refractors that our protagonist had obtained to continue with his hobby. Sir, what caused the disaster of the drill that you say occurred? Was the question of a reporter to the man that Naruto had coincidentally met earlier. I'm sorry, but it's confidential, was the only response the man could give in response to the reporter, which didn't seem to convince him, so insisting further on the subject, he decided to cover a different topic. And why were those involved in the drill censored on all internet platforms? The reporter asked. Well, 3 images were projected on one side of the screen, in which the censored silhouettes of 2 women and a man appeared. It's confidential, the man responded again before getting into his car and leaving the place without any information. Even so, and yet this news in itself had been completely ignored by a sleeping Naruto, who only dedicated himself to that to sleep peacefully, or well, that's what he hoped, since without him really wanting it, a growling stomach made its presence felt, causing the blonde's brow to furrow in annoyance. So trying to ignore the growing discomfort in his stomach, the blonde settled closer to an equally sleeping brown-haired girl, now commonly known as Dahlia, who simply let the blonde wrap his arms around her waist and pull her closer to him. This little bit of comfort lasted for at least 7 more minutes and would have lasted longer if his stomach hadn't emitted a tortuous second rumble that finally woke him up. Ah, this is crap, the blonde said to himself with annoyance, while he absent-mindedly slid his hands off the well-curved waists of the brown-haired girl who simply continued sleeping. So getting up calmly and slowly, the blonde absent-mindedly touched his sleepy eyes while letting out a yawn. I think there's still something in the fridge to cook, the blonde said to himself, trying to remember what was in the fridge to make. However, on his way out of bed, Naruto's sight couldn't help but stop at the scene in front of him. After all, between her feet covered almost completely, only revealing her head resting on her stomach, was a sleeping Rebecca, while next to her was a Sasha who seemed to be in a rather interesting dream, if the slight murmurs and the small line of drool were anything to go by. However, this did not end there, since on the left side of the blonde, there was a pair of women that Naruto recognized as Gloria and Kiwi, who were completely naked like all the others and he himself. Well, it was a pretty busy night, the blonde said calmly, only for a pair of panties that had been hanging from a ventilation duct a few moments ago to fall right on his head, almost as if he was confirming the blonde's statement. So, taking the panties, Naruto looked at them for a moment until he identified them as Kiwi's panties. Leaving his panties aside, the blonde slid out of bed as quietly as possible, with the intention of not waking the girls up until he finally got out completely, but not before taking the opportunity to squeeze Rebecca's buttocks that he liked so much. Needless to say, the lowly-like woman let out a small moan. Okay, let's see what I make for dinner, the blonde said to himself as he left the room, only to run into 3 people that Naruto recognized very well. After all, he had been working with them for a while, so raising an eyebrow in confusion at their presence, Naruto decided to say a sarcastic comment. I'm going to have to install a security system here, or even a stoner will end up getting in here, Naruto commented with some amusement. So early and you still maintain that sarcastic and irritating attitude, commented Amain with some annoyance, while putting a piece of bread in his mouth. Anyway, what's going on? The blonde asked calmly as he headed to the fridge and saw that supplies were actually running low, so he simply grabbed a carton of juice, along with one of those pre-prepared meals that just had to be heated up. We have a job, Main replied, getting straight to the point as he watched the blonde who didn't seem to care about the fact that he was naked in front of them. So? And what's it about? Naruto asked calmly as he put the container in a microwave and briefly thought about how much to put in it until he finally set it to 1 minute and 30 seconds. We would prefer that you wake up the others so as not to explain twice. This time the one who spoke was Adorio, who watched as the silent Lucy tried hard not to see a certain part of the blonde, so trying to annoy the white-haired girl a little, she decided to comment on that part that Lucy didn't want to see. "I see you have a pretty endowed cock," Dorio commented with amusement as he watched Lucy shudder a little at his comment. Naruto, on the other hand, stopped drinking the juice from the carton and looked down at his penis, only to return a look to his blonde companion with what was the definition of pride. "And it's totally natural, no prosthetic cocks, this is the cock I was born with," Naruto replied quite proudly as he pointed at his member. Now Lucy's defenses were breaking down and she was only giving brief glances at the member, while Dorio was actually stroking his chin as a clear sign that he was comparing what the blonde had said with the member hanging from his crotch in the end. He had to admit that this was the first totally organic cock he had seen with this certainly large size. "Okay, that's enough. We're not here to talk about the boy's dick," Main reprimanded, already annoyed since they had completely strayed from the main topic. "No? I thought that was the reason why you were here," Naruto said with amusement, only to see how Main seemed to get annoyed with him. "Okay, calm down, I'll wake the others up," Naruto reassured him without really showing that he regretted upsetting the big guy. 5 hours later. The mission hadn't really been much like the typical missions they were all used to, it had only been a recovery mission, in which for obvious reasons, there had been at least 15 people dead, in ways that no one in the group would want to describe after all. Our blonde protagonist had a very peculiar way of dealing with enemies, and although they had seen it before, that didn't mean that the blonde's creativity when it came to killing was innovative, so to speak. They had discovered that once when Naruto had entered to rescue Arine with only a rubber ducky, how did those involved end up? You can imagine. But anyway, the point is that the job had been completed successfully, and now all that was left was to meet with the client to confirm and receive payment for the job. So leaving the small abandoned building in the red light district of the city, the group went into what for everyone was the work vehicle, which was the van they had seen before. Once the car started moving, a thought crossed the blonde's mind related to transportation, and that was due to the fact that his large vehicle collection mostly only consisted of 2-passenger sports cars with 1 or 2 that could seat 4 or 5 if you wanted to go a little tight. Okay, this isn't much of a problem if we didn't count the fact that he had a little more company in his bat cave. It's even more, and with this truck they were going and they were tight, but Naruto wouldn't complain about having Dahlia sitting on his crotch. Cough cough cough. Back to the topic. Naruto already knew that the answer to his mental rambling was obvious, but somehow he had to kill time until he got to meet the client. Conclusion. Naruto was going to get a truck and he was going to modify it in such a bucking powerful way that he could already feel that feeling of pride for creating such a beast, but well, that would be in a few days later. For the moment he would focus on some details that were missing from the Toyota Supra he had in his garage. That, and because Naruto wasn't stupid and he knew that the pile of prosthetics and chrome that Main had were already taking its toll on him, therefore whenever he was near him he kept his guard up in case the big guy finally lost his temper and became a psychopath. But well, Naruto must have been in his thoughts for too long, since once he returned to the real world, he was already watching Main hand a briefcase to a guy in a suit who nodded while his eyes shone a little, indicating that he had made the payment for the job. Shortly after, a pile of $5,000.00 was deposited into his account. Okay, the pay for these jobs were relatively good, almost reaching the weekly pay of someone with an average job. However, it was still better than sitting all day in an office while you have to put up with your idiot boss and your lazy coworkers who only know how to eat their snot. The thing is that once again Naruto had become immersed in his thoughts, while now it was Rebecca's ass that he felt in his crotch. But although many would say that being gone for too long was bad in Night City for Naruto, that opinion was an exception, since the blonde's spatial awareness was quite sharp and trained to such an extent that even if someone tried to kill him while he slept, his body would react in his defense, a skill that he acquired with a lot of experience. Let's leave it at that. But the job is done, you can go, Main informed the group, who had just begun to dissolve. Today had been a normal day as far as it went, there hadn't been any significant changes or events, so there was nothing to worry about. The days went by and to be honest there wasn't any outstanding event that was worth mentioning, everything was calm, so to speak, the work never ended, and although Naruto would never have imagined it, it was quite relaxing to have companions with whom to spend time and live together. Of course, sometimes they had the odd fight over meaningless things, but they were very few, therefore it wasn't something that affected their peculiar, but at the same time normal group relationship. The day had been another normal day with a normal errand and an increasingly paranoid Main. Honestly, he couldn't even hide the fact that his hands were shaking erratically, or for the simple fact that he himself didn't seem to notice to begin with. Things were getting worse with him, and Naruto wasn't willing to leave his lovers in danger, just as he wasn't willing to leave a certain white-haired girl in danger, who a good couple of days ago seemed to be eager to say something to him. Okay, Naruto knew it was because of that time in the rain, but he wouldn't force her. Oreo on the other hand was difficult to cover the subject with her. Naruto really didn't want anything to happen to her either, but you didn't have to be a genius to know that it was a bad idea to mention the subject that Main was losing her mind. After all, she was Main's lover, therefore Naruto didn't really know how to bring up the subject with her. And if it was a pain to talk to Doryo about the matter, you wouldn't imagine what it was like to talk about it with Main. Oh yeah, surely if a shootout were to break out, Naruto would come and mention the subject, so to speak. Analyzing the situation a little more, Naruto finally took the most functional path, so to speak. He would talk about the subject with Dahlia, Rebecca, Kiwi, Sasha, Lucy, so that they would keep a finger on the trigger from now on, and with Gloria. Since she didn't participate in his jobs, she really wasn't in danger. With Doryo, he would choose to try to prevent something from happening to him when that moment came. Well, today was another day with a simple extermination job where the pay was once again the base salary of a worker in a regularly decent position. However, unlike previous times where the pay was divided and everyone went their own way, today was a day where they thought it would be a good idea to have a lunch together. That's right, Naruto had to call an annoyed Gloria to meet them at a restaurant. Naruto was sure that the older brunette was upset by the fact that he had gone out of his way to prepare a lunch for her lover and companions. So there they all sat in a McDonald's waiting for a waitress to bring the order, which consisted of a bunch of hamburgers that varied in size, along with a bunch of fried chicken, enough to satisfy the whole group. But anyway, ignoring the subject, someone decided to break the silence that had been ruining the atmosphere in the group for a while now. Hey, Naruto called a Shah who seemed to be curious about some previous event that had to do with a Naruto, who simply looked up from the gun that he was currently disassembling with the intention of cleaning it. If the city was that messed up, you could take out a gun without fear of someone getting upset and causing a scene. Yes. Naruto responded, equally curious to the question that was going to be thrown at him in the next 7 seconds. Why don't you use smart weapons? That was the question from the black-haired woman with feline features, causing everyone to turn their attention to the blonde, who didn't answer immediately. And in reality, the netrunner was somewhat right. After all, most of the group had used a smart weapon at some point, however they never saw the blonde use said weapons. Now what was a smart weapon? Well, here I'm going to put you in context. These weapons had a guided projectile system that did exactly what was said. They fired bullets that could take fairly large curves in order to hit their target, a quite useful weapon if you were to ask anyone, however quite expensive. So it was no surprise that everyone was curious about the blonde's answer, who simply left the back of the handle of his pistol on the table. Yes, well, the truth is I feel that if I use one of those weapons I'm going to lose practice when using the normal ones, if you understand me. Naruto responded calmly to the group, who didn't say anything for a few brief seconds until Dahlia asked another question. But you have one of those weapons? Asks the brown-haired girl, causing Naruto to bring his right hand to his chin and thought. Actually I do have one, but I don't usually use it. I only use it when I'm under too much pressure, Naruto replied again calmly, pausing only to say something else as an afterthought. Also, that weapon is somewhat peculiar, Naruto added calmly, causing a certain white-haired girl to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. However, she couldn't have her turn to ask because a worker at the restaurant finally arrived with a tray full of hamburgers, which caused everyone to downplay the conversation they were having and focus on consuming the mountain of food. However, someone seemed unhappy with what they saw. I can't believe we're here eating instead of the food that's probably already cold in the fridge," complained an annoyed Gloria with her arms crossed, causing the group that shared the house with her to look away. "Come on, Mom, it's just for today," tried to cheer up Dahlia, who already had a bit of hamburger in her mouth. "This junk has no nutrition. How do you expect to stay healthy if you keep eating this stuff?" Gloria scolded, only to feel like Naruto switched places with Rebecca, who was on her right, and calmly wrapped his arms around the older brown-haired girl's waist so she couldn't escape. "Hey honey, why don't we enjoy the moment and just eat?" Naruto suggested as he grabbed a hamburger and began to playfully move it in the direction of Gloria's mouth, who looked at him disapprovingly. However, once she felt the blonde's hand slide from her waist to her thighs, she finally gave in with a sigh and took a bite of the junk food. "You see, it wasn't that difficult," Naruto commented calmly, causing most of the group to sweat drop, except for Main, who seemed to be gone, something that Naruto noticed but decided not to say anything about it. Time passed, and what was once a majestic mountain of hamburgers had now become a pitiful mountain of boxes and papers, leaving a fairly satisfied group with their bellies bursting. Well, maybe today wasn't like the previous days, one of those days that seemed routine now, but well, at least in the course of those 58 minutes in which they were eating, Main had seemed to have returned to its senses and was back to its usual self. Now the only thing left was to wait for the bill to come, and that's it. Everyone would go their separate ways. Note: I know that McDonald's doesn't work like that, but if I didn't do it like that, the scene wouldn't have turned out the way I wanted. And as if they had heard his thoughts, Naruto glimpsed a figure of a waitress from the place going in his direction, with the clear intention of charging them, so waiting for the girl to arrive at his table Naruto strangely noticed a slight change in the environment, and no nothing had visibly changed, and yet something did not quite fit Naruto, as if it were a self-defensive reflex, the surroundings Naruto quickly slowed down and looked around. The people in the place had nothing strange, they were just simple civilians, the passers-by walking outside the place on the other side of the window, that his side did not seem to have anything strange. The girl who came in his direction did not seem to have anything particularly rare, as if it had been an electric shock directed directly at the back of his neck. Naruto finally noticed what was not adding up, and the saddest thing was that Soul realized when the worker was already in front of his table and had projected a receipt when Naruto noticed a peculiarly recognizable tatuaje for Naruto on the back of his forearm. Fucking hell was the only thing Naruto whispered before, without wasting a second more time, the blonde grabbed the waitress's arm with force and then took out his gun and roughly and forcefully pressed it under the girl's chin. Strangely, she didn't react so exactly, not to say that there wasn't even a reaction to begin with. However, with the rest of the group, this reaction from the blonde was quite unexpected and it took them about 8 seconds to get over the surprise. "Naruto, what are you doing?" A surprised Dahlia asked the blonde, who didn't waver in his grip and instead tightened his grip on the gun. Naruto Lucy was going to say, however what she was going to say was interrupted by the blonde's next words. "You better give me one really bucking reason why I shouldn't smash your skull on the floor," Naruto threatened with what looked like suppressed rage in the direction of the black-haired woman in front of him. However, the response didn't come from the impassive woman and instead appeared from another figure that came out of somewhere at random. "Well, you're getting rusty, Naruto," was the comment that caught the attention of those present in the direction of the steps of a woman with black cloth pants, a long-sleeved white shirt, shiny leather gloves on her hands that held a cigarette, that calmly proceeded to guide to the quite beautiful face of a black-haired woman who held dark glasses covering those eyes as black as her hair. Silence was present in the place even though there were still a good number of people acting as if nothing was happening. This detail was obviously noticed by Naruto, who frowned even more in annoyance when he understood what was happening and how he didn't realize it before, or to be more specific he didn't expect it. Could you stop aiming at my protege, you're making her nervous," the woman commented with an attempt to be sarcastic, however that didn't seem to work as her face remained impassive, and to begin with the face of the one she identified as her protege was no different from hers. However, Naruto didn't move his weapon and kept looking at her with annoyance, causing an already tired Rebecca to take out her heavy rifle and point it at the woman with glasses, only for all those who were supposedly ordinary civilians in the place to get up and take out weapons and point them at the group, causing them all to react and take out their weapons as well, and Adalia quickly used the Sandevistan. However, before she could do anything else a guy quickly appeared behind her immobilizing her only to realize that Naruto had already let go of the girl's hand to point another gun at the guy's head, who seemed more than surprised to see that Naruto had anticipated his move. Silence fell again and Naruto had already analyzed the scene, just seeing that one of this woman's men had a Sandevistas equal or similar to Dahlia's made him assume that the other people present were no worse than that man, so snapping his teeth Naruto spoke. "What the buck do you want, Monica?" Naruto asked with annoyance, finally identifying the leader of the group as Monica, who simply gave him a dry smile, or well, she tried to smile. "I just came to do business with you," Monica began calmly, drawing the group's attention and causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. "Are you some kind of fixer?" Lucy asked, still holding the nanowire sticking out of her palm. "Fixer? Oh no, nothing like that, let's just say Naruto and I have a history," Monica revealed without really giving any information. "Monica," Naruto began, a little calmer but still aiming at the guy who was holding Dahlia still. "You know I don't work at the Continental anymore," Naruto reminded the black-haired girl with some calmness, who nodded in understanding. "Yes, I'm aware of it, but this isn't about whether or not you're on the mainland," Monica began, leaving a tense silence as she approached the blonde until she was so close that it seemed that at any moment the brunette would kiss him. However, she didn't do such a thing and instead brought her mouth close to Naruto's ear. "This is about the fact that you owe me one," Monica finally said as she slowly guided her left hand to the blonde's crotch and then gently grabbed his package, causing Naruto's eye to twitch a little. However, for the others, this obviously infuriated them. After all, they were desecrating their lover's glorious member. Moving away from Naruto, the black-haired woman finally gave a look to the man who was holding Dahlia immobilized as a sign to let her go, so following his boss's order, the man released Dahlia and walked away from the group. "Now clarifying my reasons, I'm going to send you some information about the job," Monica informed as her eyes shone a little along with Naruto's, who opened the document to see what the job was about. However, this didn't seem to please Main, who spoke, drawing the attention of the black-haired girl. If you know that if you want to present a job to us you have to present it to me, Main spoke, identifying himself as the leader of the group. However, Monica simply gave him a simple glance before speaking again. I think you misunderstood, this is a matter between Naruto and me, I'm not trying to hire them, Monica informed calmly only for Dahlia to refute. Well, I'm going to help Naruto, Dahlia said, causing Monica's expression to change slightly with a raised eyebrow for the first time. However, she couldn't say anything as the other girls in the group, with the exception of Dorio, quickly seemed interested in doing the unpaid job, or at least Rebecca and Sasha seemed more hysterical about joining in, since Gloria seemed hesitant due to the fact that she wasn't really a fighter. And Kiwi and Lucy only raised their hands slightly due to their resentful natures. However, none of that mattered when Naruto's voice caught everyone's attention. Monica, are you crazy? Was what Naruto said, looking at Monica as if she were currently dancing in the funniest way possible. That's a very good question, and I don't know how to answer you, Monica commented with her kind of impassive face, however turning her gaze to her protege, who was no longer being pointed at by Naruto, she proceeded to ask her. Estella, am I crazy? Monica redirected the question to the now recognized Estella, who simply looked at her calmly. No, my lady, you are as sane as any person, Estella responded calmly, while Naruto did not seem convinced of it. After all, he had personally seen the black-haired woman with glasses ask questions that would turn your stomach. You see, I'm sane, so this job is going to happen, Monica declared calmly. Sigh Monica, we're talking about killing your brother, Naruto clarified, not caring about the fact that she wanted to kill her brother, but rather the fact that killing that man was so difficult because Monica and her brother were like two sides of the same coin, they both had experienced people with high-end implants. So? The bastard was the first to throw the stone when he sent someone to kill me after my father died, and I guess you already know why he did it, Monica explained calmly, however Naruto still noticed that the black-haired girl was really angry. Yes, he wanted to keep the inheritance, Naruto clarified, receiving a nod from Monica. Wait a minute, why does it have to be Naruto who has to do this job? Asked an annoyed Gloria, not wanting her lover to get into such a big mess. Because Naruto is the most efficient and experienced person I know, and because he owes me one, Monica replied as she took out a rather large coin that was recognized by Kiwi and Sasha that night. And what happened to us wanting to go with Naruto? Sasha asked curiously, causing Monica to touch her chin in thought. Only one can go, Monica finally responded, leaving the place with her followers, leaving a silent group. Chapter 8. 6 years ago. 12 were the years that a young man who was barely entering his adolescence phase, a blonde boy with features that for many could be considered somewhat elegant for a boy of his age, however the streets where the blonde who for many reasons we all know was Naruto walked did not match the same one, after all the streets he walked could be summed up as little more than filthy. Homeless people sitting in a pool of their own fluids, prostitutes offering their services at prices that were almost too cheap to the point where you could screw them in an alley and walk away without paying, men selling drugs to kids their own age, the occasional corpse dumped on the corner of some smelly alley. And yet none of that was enough to make the amused smile of a Naruto walker falter in the slightest, as he walked with his polished black shoes and his tuxedo suit, leaving a highlight on his figure from his surroundings full of smelly people. Nothing and possibly nothing was going to be enough to accomplish the feat of taking the smile off the blonde who simply stopped walking right in front of a particularly dilapidated building full of graffiti everywhere the eye could reach. And yet, ignoring the fact that he was about to enter this place that smelled like shit and was possibly full of very bad men, Naruto's eyes simply lit up as he searched for the music that was going to inspire him this time. I found you was the only whisper from a Naruto who still didn't play the music and instead simply proceeded to knock on the door. Inside the building. Knock knock, the sound of the two sharp knocks that alerted a man with the generic appearance of a middle-class mafia thug, with one or another tattoo more or less visible on his neck or arms. Raising an eyebrow at the touch of someone who surely wasn't a member of the mafia due to the lack of an agreed rhythm to be able to enter, the man in a somewhat elegant suit simply approached the door and then looked at a screen right next to the door that played the images of a camera just above the door. However, the man could only raise an eyebrow at the mere sight of a 12-year-old brat waving at the camera. This has to be a joke that had been the instant thought of the man who was now somewhat amused by the sight of the brat who according to him didn't know who he was dealing with. However, his amusement quickly vanished when the blonde calmly pulled a gun from between his tuxedo and then pointed it lightly at the side of the door. But what her words quickly died away when Naruto pulled the trigger and an energy bullet was fired through the wall and at the man behind them. Wasting no time, Naruto's eyes once again shone, and this time however, it wasn't to search for music, but rather to hack into the strong wall in front of him that didn't hold up much and simply opened up, giving him way. Entering the building, Naruto quickly looked to his right and almost instantly, Naruto's brow furrowed as he saw the smoking hole in the man's chest, who just lay on the floor. Damn, I wanted to hit him on the head, Naruto said to himself with a pout at not being able to do what he wanted. However, after a couple of seconds of seeing the body, Naruto quickly shrugged his shoulders and simply began to go deeper into the corridors, while finally giving the command that gave to play the music. Okay, let's give it a go, Naruto said to himself as his steps went from being calm to a light jog, while he felt his heart begin to accelerate at an alarmingly fast pace, this in order to make the blood circulation faster, thus causing the brain to work overtime to perform what for Naruto was his adrenaline mode. 3 seconds later and Naruto's fun trot had already turned into a race down the certainly long and dirty hallway, full of rooms on the sides that didn't even have doors to hide the interior, so taking out another gun just like the first one, Naruto quickly aims to his sides as he passes in front of the first 2 doors. Our blonde protagonist wasn't surprised when the first thing he saw inside the room to his right was a relatively obese man raping a girl who couldn't have been more than 13, why wasn't he surprised? Well, maybe that was because since he was doing missions for these guys, the blonde had seen countless horrible and certainly sick things, so this, as far as it goes, wasn't a surprise. So letting his finger pull the trigger, Naruto quickly looked away without even making sure the bullet had hit the target. Why? Because Naruto knew it was going to hit him once again. Why? Because Naruto said so. Looking to his left, the scene was, well, in a way it was almost the same, however, it seems that the guy who was raping the possibly 15-year-old girl had some fetish for hitting his partner, if we take into account the fact that the girl's face was practically disfigured and, well, she was possibly dead. But, well, leaving it to think about it, Naruto simply pulled the trigger again, and unlike his previous shot, this time Naruto waited to see how the energy shot pierced the skull of the man in Arasaka uniform. The view was cut off as Naruto walked past his 2 victims and then prepared to kill the other 2 people in the 2 rooms that followed. 15 seconds later and 8 more shots, Naruto finally ended up sliding until his right leg lightly hit the wall at the end of the hallway. Without really thinking, Naruto quickly continued running while reloading his guns and discarding the scenes that would certainly disturb anyone. After all, he still had to kill the boss of this small mafia of rapists. But that was all a man could say when suddenly his brain received critical damage caused by a bullet and he knew nothing more. He didn't even know that the one who ended up killing him had been a simple child who ran past him and who no longer even remembered his face. Meanwhile, in the mafia boss's room. "Boss, we have a problem," was the shout of a man who abruptly entered the room of a man of average height, a rather striking tuxedo suit of bright red and a lot of prosthetics on his body. "What's going on?" the boss asked his subordinate, who wasted no time giving him a hasty answer. "There's an intruder, he's killing all our clients and men," the man replied, causing the boss to frown at this inconvenience. Grunting in annoyance, the man stood up from his desk, revealing that he strangely had his pants down. However, the reason for this quickly became clear as a 14-year-old girl emerged from under the desk, seemingly speechless. Pulling up his pants, the boss quickly walked to a room right next to his office, where a couple of his men were sitting in front of a bunch of televisions, showing a bunch of cameras. So, taking a quick look at the cameras, it wasn't difficult to find the intruder running through the entire building, killing anyone who got in front of him in a very efficient way. "Fucking hell, at the rate he's going, he'll be here in less than 2 minutes," said the boss, causing his subordinate to nod, and without wasting time he left the room to warn the rest of the men. Meanwhile, with Naruto. Click was the only sound Naruto heard before dropping his 2 guns, and then noticing that near a corner in front of him that possibly led to some stairs, there was a pile of broken glass, so sliding across the floor, Naruto extended his right arm like an improvised shovel and tried to grab as much glass as possible, and then without wasting time he took 2 pieces of glass and threw them in the direction of 2 men who had just come down the stairs. They could do absolutely nothing against the pieces of glass that stuck in their jugulars. "Oh, that was great," Naruto said as he passed over the bleeding men and then went up the stairs to continue his killing spree. Burgle was the sound of someone choking on their own blood as they were stabbed by another piece of glass sticking out of their throat. However, it didn't last long as another piece of glass embedded itself in their forehead, causing a quicker death, so falling on their back Naruto went over them while grabbing 5 pieces of glass and throwing them at the same time at another group of men coming out of a corner that this time Naruto hoped would finally lead to their main target. The sound of meat was all Naruto heard when his projectiles finally embedded themselves in his enemies. However, to Naruto's disappointment, one unfortunately missed and embedded itself in the weight of a man who groaned in pain. "Fucking hell, really? How could I have missed that one?" Naruto complained in annoyance as he stood next to the man in pain who tried to point his gun at Naruto. However, Naruto didn't let him and instead took his last 3 glasses and quickly threw them at the man's face, who couldn't do anything but let out one last moan of pain before falling dead. "Sigh, whatever," Naruto said to himself before taking the dead man's gun and finally walking to the doors where his target should be, so pushing the somewhat old-looking doors Naruto saw what for him was a rather cliché and repetitive scene. Yes, there was his target standing in the middle of what appeared to be his office, while he had a girl of about 14 years old as a hostage. Naruto was not particularly one to complain, however seeing this scene in his last 7 missions was already something to complain about. This has to be a joke, Naruto said in a sigh, drawing the attention of his target, who was pointing a gun at the girl's head. What? The boss asked, frowning at the apparent disappointment of the brat in front of him. And you still ask? Now all that's left is for you to say something like, "Oh, congratulations on making it this far," Naruto said, clearly annoyed as he tried to imitate the man's voice in front of him. However, hoping the man would deny his statement, Naruto slowly turned to look at the man who seemed somewhat nervous. Seriously was the only thing Naruto said, causing the boss to become indignant at the boy's overly disappointed voice. "You little jerk," I wasn't going to say his sentence was cut off as a bullet tore through his brain and hit the wall behind him. "Shut up, I don't want to hear your voice anymore," said Naruto, finally noticing the girl lying on the floor with a rather empty expression. However, as soon as the girl stopped feeling the grip of the man who had raped her so many times, she looked to her side, only to see the gun that a couple of seconds ago had been firmly pointed at her head. This was obviously the easiest way out of her agony, so leaning towards the gun, the girl took it and without wasting time, pointed it at her head and then pulled the trigger and blew her brains out. A shot that echoed throughout the building and that had only been heard by the few underage girls who had been raped and who were now free to do whatever they wanted. That was why Naruto didn't stop her, because he knew what that feeling of torture that ate away at you incessantly was. That's right, Naruto knew what that was, he knew it very well. And perhaps for the first time in all this time, Naruto's smile finally faltered as his gaze fell upon the body of the girl who had freed herself from a life full of traumas that, while not the same, could still be understood. Naruto was the call that made Naruto come out of his thoughts, only to see that on one side of his vision, a small screen appeared in which the image of a Monica appeared, who seemed to be in the same impassive and calm mood as always. "It's ready, you can go," were the only words that Naruto heard the black-haired girl say, words that Naruto knew were not directed towards the fulfillment of the mission, but rather something beyond that. Those words were the flames of his freedom, so giving himself a slight nod, our blonde protagonist simply turned around and began to leave the room, leaving the group of girls behind. Naruto heard the second shot that possibly ended the tortuous life of another girl who had pulled the trigger while walking down the somewhat bloody hallway full of dead bodies. Once again the shot of the same gun was heard in the certainly silent place while Naruto turned a corner and more bodies that he had killed surrounded the hallway with certainly creative deaths. Another shot was heard as Naruto reached the exit door, letting the last sound of the shot fade into the empty, silent place that no longer contained any living soul. Leaving the place, Naruto let the rain soak his clothes full of bloodstains that little by little melted and stained his white shirt even more, which was now turning a pale red. "I am free." Change of scene. Opening his eyes somewhat slowly, Naruto looked at the ceiling of the room with some nostalgia as he remembered that moment when he had finally been able to live his life as he wanted. It had been a liberating sensation, however, one could never be totally free of one's roots. There were always those small roots that, no matter what, always ended up clinging to one. "I'm not sleepy anymore," Naruto said to himself in a whisper. Change of scene. Night walks really weren't a safe way to spend time, however. When you're someone who's spent most of your life on these streets, watching them change over time, you tend to not give it much thought. After all, these streets tend to teach you to be on the lookout for any idiot who wants to intimidate you, or well, at least that's how it had been for Lucy. So walking at a pace that many would say was slow, the white-haired hacking expert simply advanced through the relatively empty streets of the Hetwood district. If she continued at the pace she was going, she would surely reach the Corpo Plaza in a couple of minutes, the center of Night City, the place where the megabuildings of important corporations stood firmly. Corporations that, no matter how different they were, whether in services or ways of working, they all had something in common. And what was that? Well, each and every one of them was corrupt to the teeth. All of them in one way or another always got what they wanted. It didn't matter if they had to silence someone innocent for them. An innocent life could be used for their benefit, just as she herself was used since her childhood. Looking up at the sky with no stars standing out, Lucy had to wonder if there was a corporation anywhere in the world that was fair in what it did. Lucy scoffed at his question. Of course there is no corporation, because in one way or another those corporations always seem to be a threat to other corporations, due to the simple fact that if this corporation with just purposes existed, then many of the clients they have would end up leaving with them, so in order to not let them be harmed, they did everything possible so that they could not emerge. In short, all of this was a giant monopoly. Immersed in her thoughts, Lucy didn't realize when she had arrived at the Corpo Plaza, she didn't even know how long she had been thinking about the matter, but well, that didn't matter much. After all, the purpose of her night walks was to distract herself and pass the time in her thoughts, so time was rarely relevant at these moments. Looking around, Lucy noticed that there was no one around her as expected. After all, it was 2 a.m. However, once she looked around, the white-haired girl finally noticed that she wasn't totally alone in the place after all, because a couple of meters away, sitting on a bench, a certain blonde man kept silently looking in the direction of his car parked in front of him while smoking a cigarette. Staying silent for a couple of seconds looking at the blonde, Lucy wondered if she should approach the blonde to chat. However, before starting her walk towards him, Lucy noticed that he seemed a little gloomy, something rare in the always funny Naruto who didn't mind making jokes and bad taste in serious moments. However, not seeing a real problem and approaching the blonde, Lucy finally took her first step in the direction of the blonde. With Naruto taking a drag on his cigarette, Naruto simply let the minty flavor of the cigarette coat his throat as he felt the presence of a Lucy who finally stopped next to him while the silence continued to do its job, which was to provide a somber atmosphere. Moving to the side, Naruto simply made the white-haired girl understand that she could sit next to her, so without wasting a second, Lucy simply approached and then sat next to the blonde, who didn't say anything for the next 40 seconds, possibly the longest time Lucy had ever seen the blonde silent. "Can't you sleep either?" Naruto finally asked Lucy, who simply nodded in confirmation to the question. "I guess this is going to be a long night," Naruto added with a small hint of mockery that really went unnoticed. "It seems so," Lucy replied calmly as she watched Naruto lean back without losing sight of the shape of his car, so following his gaze, Lucy finally analyzed more carefully the car that once again was one she had never seen. "God, how many cars do you have?" Lucy asked with some sarcasm, intending to lighten the mood. In fact, Lucy had to admit that she had never seen herself in a scene where she would trade places with Naruto. Dry chuckle, "You'd be surprised by the figure," Naruto responded calmly and with some mockery that this time Lucy could notice. However, before Lucy could say anything else, Naruto spoke again. "You know, as a child I was always fascinated by cars," Naruto began with nostalgia as he continued looking at the car, one of the first models created by KING-JEISON. "NASCAR cars, Formula 1, rally cars, Le Mans cars, I like any kind of car," Naruto continued as he took another drag on the cigarette that seemed to be halfway out, and yet Naruto simply let Lucy slide her hand in the direction of the cigarette and then took it away and turned it to his own mouth. "I spent all my time imagining driving one of them and how it must feel," Naruto added calmly, then watched as Lucy brought the cigarette closer to his face, so putting his mouth to the cigarette that was still between Lucy's fingers, Naruto took another drag. "But you achieved your goal," Lucy replied as she watched Naruto let out smoke through his nose. "Certainly, but I had to go through a lot before I could live the life I wanted," Naruto replied, implying that his path had not been easy. That answer left a small gap of silence between the two that was once again broken by Naruto. "My life was hard, like probably many in Night City," Naruto began to speak again and then turned to look at Lucy. "Just like you," Naruto added while Lucy and Naruto's gazes remained locked on each other. "I don't know what kind of life you've led, however, I can know with certainty that you've had a path full of difficulties, and that's why I know you understand me." Naruto finally finished speaking without taking his gaze off Lucy, who also didn't take her gaze off him and instead simply said. "I already thought about it," Lucy said in a somewhat whispered voice to Naruto, who knew instantly what she was talking about. "So?" Naruto asked expectantly at Lucy's answer, who simply responded with a question. "Do you want to come in?" Was the same question Lucy had asked the blonde that time when he had left her at her apartment. Clear. Change of scene. Supporting the back of a slightly agitated Lucy, Naruto, who kept her lifted by her thighs, simply stood watching as the white-haired girl took off all her upper garments, revealing her average-sized breasts, but so pretty and pink that Naruto could already say that he would never get tired of them. Without wasting time and letting Lucy take his cheeks and guide him to a passionate kiss, Naruto simply savored the soft and warm texture of Lucy's lips, which deepened the kiss even further. Breaking the kiss due to the need to breathe, the couple remained silent, only letting their heavy breathing echo in the room that was only being illuminated by the multiple neon signs that entered through the window that overlooked the balcony. "Naruto," Lucy called in an almost inaudible whisper that only Naruto could hear due to the simple fact that Lucy was in front of him. "Make me yours," the white-haired woman asked as she leaned forward and once again connected her lips with Naruto's, allowing two broken souls to immerse themselves in each other's pleasure and comfort. Chapter 9. It was around 7:45 in the morning, and a rather exhausted Naruto was dozing on a bed he had never slept in before, a bed he had had a few rounds of rather passionate hexen not more than 2 hours ago. However, the sleeping blonde cared little about that at this moment, he only cared about sleeping and hugging the curvy body of a Lucy, who was also sleeping with her back to him, while she let Naruto hug her from behind. However, this moment of fullness between the blonde and the white-haired girl didn't seem to want to last any longer because the sound of a notification that only Naruto could hear made a small window appear on the side of his dark vision due to his still closed eyes. Bro, Naruto growled in annoyance when the notification sound resonated in his head again, implying that the message was something important. This fact actually made Naruto slowly open his eyes as he forced his brain to process what was happening after all. The configuration he had adapted in his notifications was something that rarely came into operation. Why? Well, because there were only a few things Naruto considered important enough for him to consider, and all of those important things had to do with the safety of his home, a place he wasn't at the moment. Widening his eyes at this last detail, Naruto quickly performed mental commands to see what the problem was, commands that quickly led him to a screen projecting images from the camera on his front door. Now you would surely think that Naruto was worried about his cars, his belongings or many other things, however all those things couldn't matter less to the blonde. No, the reason why Yam was worried was because of the fact that he had left his girls alone in the workshop. Well, maybe you'll think that Naruto's worries had no real foundation, since although Gloria wasn't one for fights and was more focused on the medical area, the others could defend themselves. However, that was in a scene where they would face enemies, a scene that wasn't the one he was watching now, because the scene he was watching now was that of a package that was calmly hovering in front of the entrance door of his house. Shit, Naruto abruptly got up from the bed as he scanned the box, revealing that said box was emitting a low-frequency hum, along with a radiation plate. What's wrong? Lucy asked with quite a bit of sleep in her eyes and a relatively hoarse voice due to last night's action. Lucy, we have to go, Naruto said with some panic as he put on a pair of pants and started a call with Dahlia. Huh? Why? What's going on? This time Lucy had to force herself to shake off the sleepiness and try to understand what was happening. It's the others, they planted a bomb in my house, Naruto informed Lucy, who slowly understood the implications of what Naruto was telling her. Damn, they're in danger, Lucy finally understood while Naruto cursed when Dahlia didn't answer his call. Without wanting to waste any more time, Naruto quickly took his shirt and approached Lucy, who was putting on her panties, and without her expecting it, Naruto quickly put the shirt on her and then lifted it over his shoulders and left the apartment in a run. Scene change 15 minutes ago. Brunt, ugh, I'm hungry, was the whine of a hungry Rebecca who was simply lying on the workshop sofa. This comment caught the attention of Gloria, who was searching in the fridge for something to cook. However, noticing that there wasn't much in the fridge that would provide her with a substantial meal, Gloria simply let out a sigh. Supplies are running low, Gloria commented calmly as a sleepy Kiwi and Sasha left the room in decent home clothes. Good morning, they both greeted with different tones of voices, causing everyone to turn to look at them and greet them in the same way. Good morning, they all greeted in unison except for one, Dahlia, who at this moment was fervently trying to get through a particularly difficult part of a game. Then let's go shopping, Rebecca suggested, already grimacing in annoyance at hunger. What's going on? Kiwi asked calmly, not knowing what they were talking about. Supplies are running out, Gloria responded equally calmly, closing the refrigerator and placing her fists on her hips. In that case, Rebecca's suggestion is logical, Kiwi replied as he approached a corner where a large amount of shoes were gathered that obviously belonged to all of them. We can also eat outside, Sasha added as she followed Kiwi's lead and rummaged through her sneakers. You know we can't all go in one car, right? Finally spoke Dahlia, who put the remote aside, already resigned to not being able to get through this part, or well, at least until she tried again later. Actually, Naruto told me that he finished his first family car, Gloria commented with a drop of sweat at the way Naruto had said that. This action was mirrored by all the others who could only let out drops of sweat. Hey, by the way, where is Naruto? Sasha asked curiously, causing Kiwi to quickly give a generic answer. Probably he went out to buy some refractors, Kiwi answered without giving it much importance, since during the last months that she had started living with her blonde lover, he would occasionally go out early to do some shopping. Yeah, probably. Okay, let's go shopping, I'm starving, said Rebecca, no longer able to hold back the growling of her stomach. 2 minutes later. Well, I must say I didn't expect this, was the half-calm comment that Sasha said to herself when she saw the family car that Naruto had modified. Naruto is going too far, added the always impassive Kiwi, who saw the beast in front of them. After all, the car in front of them was a Hummer modified to the teeth. Note. I tried to find one that didn't have such a low suspension, but well, I didn't find one. Change of scene. Hidden above a holographic billboard that looked directly at the highway below it, a camera remained focused all the time on each passing car, with the sole purpose of giving a warning to the monitoring area if there was any speed violation. However, this camera actually offered little help to the monitoring area. After all, people who used to run at high speeds always used to hide any way of being tracked. No matter if the car was a specific model or special, so to speak. Well, let's just say it didn't matter how well you hid the car's tracks. If this was a special car, that meant there weren't many models in the city, so it could be found faster. Click the camera for the 10th time that morning detected someone committing a vehicle violation. Once it took the photo and made a quick calculation of the speed at which he was going, it simply sent the data to the monitoring center to resolve. Monitoring center. A woman who was looking at the cameras with some laziness and from time to time at the map with different points in the city actually had to pay attention to the notification that appeared on the screen in front of her. But what's strange, the woman commented with some confusion while reading the notification over and over again. However, her rambling caught the attention of the colleague next to her, who turned to look at her. "What's going on?" asked the man dressed as an officer, only for the woman to ask him a question. "Hey Arturo, what's the highest speeding violation?" the woman asked, recognizing her partner as Arturo, who thought for a second. "I think it was 242 miles per hour, Arturo replied calmly, but with some confusion at the question. "So I think this will surprise you," the woman replied back as she pointed to the notification for the man to read and then widen his eyes when the notification read a solid 326 miles per hour. Fucking hell, was the only thing the man said when he did the math and knew that car was probably flying after all. It was traveling 251 miles over the speed limit. With Naruto screaming louder than a rocket breaking the sound barrier, a Koenigsegg sped through the streets of Night City, heading towards a destination known to a certain blonde. "Then Naruto, you're going to kill us both." Inside the car, the voice of Lucy could be heard doing the perfect imitation of a scared kitten, clinging tightly to her passenger seat. However, Naruto, instead of answering, simply tried once more to get a call with one of the girls that he thought were in the workshop. However, she was once again interrupted. "Damn, why aren't you answering?" Naruto cursed and asked, to which Lucy simply asked herself that question as well, until she remembered what the reason was. "They haven't gotten the new ship to connect to the World Wide Web," Lucy analyzed as best she could, while trying to maintain her composure when Naruto braked hard, causing the car to start leaving a trail of smoke, only to accelerate hard again, taking a sharp turn and a skid. "What do you mean? I thought they had already bought the ships," Naruto said with confusion and disbelief. After all, everyone had told him they had bought the ships. That question made Lucy look away with some embarrassment. "We didn't spend any money on clothes," Lucy finally admitted with some embarrassment, and it wasn't her fault. Well, maybe she was somewhat to blame, but it's just that ever since all of them had started a relationship with Naruto, they all seemed to get along pretty well. Even Kiwi, who wasn't known for participating in events like these, seemed somewhat happy to go out with them all, even when it was almost not noticeable. And how did she know that? Well, she had been her mentor, so you could say she knew her pretty well. "Are you serious?" was the only question Naruto asked as he looked away from the road to see the white-haired girl who tensed at such an action. After all, they were traveling at an insanely high speed. "Are you really trying to tell me that they didn't buy the ships because they were going shopping?" Naruto asked with some disbelief. Now of course, Naruto was actually happy that they all got along quite well, but there were things that couldn't be left for another time. But now that he remembered it, Naruto seemed to remember that he had even given them more than double the amount that the ships were worth, so that meant that more than spending all his money, they also spent the money he had given them. Sigh. Naruto let out a sigh that was meant to calm him down. However, rather than dreaming of relaxation, this simply seemed to be a snort of annoyance. "After all this is over, I'm going to have a serious talk with all of you," Naruto finally said with a look that promised pain, causing the white-haired girl to shrink in her position, as if she were a child who was scolded. 30 seconds to reach the location," said the AI, causing Naruto to put everything aside and simply take a turn to the right to finally see his workshop a couple of meters away. However, before they could even get a meter closer, the place exploded into thousands of pieces, while causing a mini shockwave that collapsed a couple of buildings next to it. "Shit," Naruto cursed as he crouched down next to Lucy, who followed his example, only to feel the car being pushed backwards, causing the tires to squeal. The explosion was in every sense quite large, well, at least large enough that no one believed it was caused by a gas leak. Even after the explosion calmed down, everything around Naruto was obscured with a thick haze of dust. "Damn it," Naruto finally said as he looked up to see that everything was in chaos, houses destroyed, people just walking around the place dead, cars that had been near the place overturned on someone. Buck. Once again Naruto cursed for not arriving in time and then hit the steering wheel of the car that was slowly being covered by a thick layer of dust. Naruto, Lucy was going to say, however what she was going to say was interrupted when the car's AI spoke. "Mr. Naruto, you have an incoming call," the AI informed Naruto, who cared little about who was calling him. However, that thought quickly vanished when the voice of an amused Rebecca spoke. "Hello Naruto. We're buying pizza for lunch. What ingredients do you want us to put on it?" was the question that the always flirtatious Rebecca asked a certain blonde who remained in a deafening silence next to a Lucy who didn't know whether to say something or not. "Naruto?" Rebecca asked once more, only for someone's head to fall on the hood of the car a couple of seconds later with a loud thud. "Huh? What was that? Naruto, are you there? Quickly answer, these phones consume a lot of money." Rebecca spoke again, implying that they were calling from a street phone. "Rebecca, are you with the others?" Was the only question Naruto managed to ask, only for the loli with twin buns to answer. Yeah, why the question?" Rebecca replied and asked, now confused. "No way, how about you tell me where they are?" Naruto offered with a kind smile. However, Lucy, who was at his side, knew that he was most likely going to give them all a lesson. After all, the air of that smile was not kind. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.